RecapManhwa Vanessa stepped out onto the balcony of the huge mansion, watching more and more people gather for the celebration for this young lady. She always thought the whole world was like a magical kingdom and her life was one endless party. Her parents snapped her out of her thoughts and she reluctantly turned her head. Her mom and dad were super loaded and Vanessa never really wondered where all that came from. She just loved them like crazy. Because they always spoiled her and never said no to anything. She never questioned who they really were until one day it was way too late. Suddenly a fire broke out in the house, spreading fast, and people barely managed to escape. That night, for the first time, she wondered if her parents had enemies, or if maybe they themselves were enemies to someone. Out of nowhere, her parents pulled out a gun and her dad ordered the nanny to get his daughter out of there. Barbara immediately scooped up the teen, covering her eyes, and ran away, dodging all the burning spots. She managed to save Vanessa, but for her parents, that day was the end, and the girl was left all alone. Tears streamed down her face non-stop. She couldn't believe her parents were gone, and the nanny begged her to follow her. While trying to comfort her, the nanny promised she could turn her into a seriously strong person, even stronger than her parents. At that moment, Vanessa only saw the nanny as strong, but she was strong, just to protect the kids she was in charge of. However, Barbara could teach her how to protect kids like her. The girl didn't fully get what the nanny meant, since she had just lost her parents and was all alone, but then she realized she couldn't give up and had always trusted Barbara. So she agreed to become her apprentice. After that, for the next 8 years, Vanessa trained at an elite nanny academy, whose location was classified. Mrs. Barbara Strike took her under her wing, educated her, and trained her. So now the young woman felt way stronger after those years. That woman became the director of the elite nanny academy, which made Vanessa happy, and now after tons of lessons and training, the girl was ready to take on her first big mission. Just before she visited the director, Barbara was chatting about a generous offer with a certain Mr. Parvalone. The director promised that with that kind of salary, they could hire top-tier workers with mad experience. But that guy needed a special worker who'd never worked with anyone before. Barbara pulled out a list of employees waiting for their first mission and handed it to the client. Mr. Parvalone wanted to know if all those people on the list were legit competent. The director assured him all her graduates mastered every basic skill perfectly. Everyone was a pro at child development and psychology. It was also key for employees to know how to give first aid to the injured. Plus, they taught self-defense so employees could protect a kid at the right moment. It was important that all employees knew how to drive vehicles and other transport well. Cybersecurity was also a big deal, so they trained employees in computer skills. Barbara also mentioned skills in home management, financial planning, politics, and a bunch of other stuff. Then the director asked Mr. Parvalone why he needed an elite nanny. Oscar Parvalone recalled how 2 weeks ago he'd talked to someone who admitted making a mistake in front of the boss and promised to fix it, but Oscar only cared about the books. He planned to bill the culprit and demand payment. Then Mr. Parvalone said he'd also notify Jack when he needed his services, but added that right now he needed more milk. Though Jack didn't fully get it, he knew his son Cody loved chocolate milk, and now Oscar was demanding Jack provide it. Just then the kid approached Oscar and he wondered why the little guy was so nervous now, but the kid got into a threatening stance and demanded double from Jack for his screw-up. Oscar then asked the kid why he wasn't behaving quietly, like he promised, but the little guy had his own demands at that moment. Jack stepped up, hands shaking, and offered the milk carton, asking if it was still needed. Oscar shook his head hard, and right then Cody confirmed his order and dove into the package. Mr. Parvalone grabbed his son, tossed him over his shoulder, and was about to leave, even though the kid kept asking for milk. Now sitting in the office, Oscar didn't mention any special reasons, just that his son no longer had a mom, and he needed someone to watch over him. Barbara assured him his son would be safe, then asked if he wanted to pick someone specific. Oscar started flipping through the employee files but didn't linger long. Soon enough, he pointed at Vanessa's resume. For some reason, she caught his eye. Pulling out the paper, Oscar demanded they assign that exact girl. However, Vanessa's specialty was cybersecurity, and the director asked if he had a big internet network at home. When he said no, Barbara said she couldn't recommend Vanessa then, and instead suggested another girl who also spoke Italian, plus another who knew self-defense, but Mr. Parvalone wasn't having it. He repeated he wanted to hire Vanessa. The director gave him a look like, really, but couldn't say no since he was paying well. She called Vanessa over and she didn't keep them waiting. Vanessa showed up right away in front of Barbara, obviously nervous since it was her first gig, but she believed she could handle it. Walking into the office, she saw Barbara's back standing still without turning around. The director told her she had a pending assignment, and Vanessa got hyped, no hesitation. Vanessa exclaimed she was totally ready, had been ready for a long time, but Barbara cut her off, confessing that actually, she wasn't the one who picked the mission for the student. Vanessa was curious why that was. The director turned to her and explained that the client chose it himself. Then Barbara walked over to the desk, pulled out a folder, and said briefly the guy's name was Oscar Parvalone. Hearing that last name, Vanessa froze. It sounded way too familiar. Vanessa remembered the headline on the front page of a newspaper that said Parvalone had launched a counterattack. It was a Mafia family, and according to the young woman, they were involved in the fire that burned down her house years ago. Barbara immediately advised her not to accept the mission, since even though it was a sign, Vanessa had the right to say no. But the girl couldn't turn down her first mission after everything her ex-nanny had done for her. Meanwhile, memories from the past hit her hard. She still didn't get why they acted that way. Until now, she thought she'd never get answers, but now she saw she had a shot. She remembered Barbara's words when she promised to make her stronger, and now she was. Without a second thought, Vanessa declared she was ready to take the mission and start immediately. The director herself hesitated about accepting due to the girl's past, but that's exactly why she accepted. Plus, Vanessa thought this Mr. Parvalone has a little kid, and since he's just a kid, he needs protection, and she was ready to give it. Vanessa also hoped that when she got there, she'd uncover the truth about that tragic day. Afterward, Barbara met back up with Mr. Parvalone, and the only thing that mattered was if the girl had signed the contract. The director confirmed Vanessa had already packed her bag and was ready to roll with the employer. As soon as she showed up at the door, Barbara decided to introduce her right away to the person she'd be working for. She said his full name while he stayed a bit distant, like he didn't want to talk to his future nanny. But still he turned around, and now Vanessa could get a close look at the person she'd have to interact with. Oscar was young and super handsome, something the girl didn't expect, and she even forgot to say hi. Mr. Parvalone broke the silence and asked Barbara if the nanny could talk. At that question, Vanessa thought he was a total idiot and kept staring at his face. Then finally she spoke, held out her hand, and introduced herself. She added she was glad to meet him and work for him, which he responded to kindly. Then Oscar told her to hop in the car when she was ready. As he walked away, Barbara decided to quickly run through the new employee's duties. The director also reminded her not to spill secrets or put the boss in awkward spots, plus no slacking off or catching feelings. Vanessa promised she wouldn't let her mentor down. She was sure she could handle everything and already felt proud. So Vanessa calmly headed to the van, and Adam, the driver, immediately came up to her. He offered to help her load her suitcase into the trunk. He thought she was an adorable girl and decided to give the new employee a little work advice. He told her not to freak out since the kid was only 4 years old. Even though she wasn't scared anymore, she politely thanked the man for the advice and headed to her seat in the van. There she saw Mr. Parvalone with his son, something unexpected for her, but she kept her cool and immediately approached the kid. She asked if he was Oscar's son. The kid introduced himself as Cordell, but his dad interrupted and clarified that everyone called him Cody. Vanessa didn't forget to be polite and said it was nice to meet the kid. Cody told his dad he didn't trust that woman and said she smelled like oranges. Vanessa didn't get why the kid said that. She even discreetly sniffed herself to check, then got curious about Mr. Parvalone's destination. The kid decided to jump ahead of his dad and revealed they were heading to a huge mansion in the city of the plebs. Oscar corrected his son's words. He explained they recently moved from the south of the country. The girl thought moving to Chicago was super far, so she pulled out her laptop. The owner immediately told her the van had Wi-Fi available if she needed it, and noticed it didn't even have a password. Then Vanessa heard a click and saw her door button go down. Oscar quickly explained they travel with the doors locked for security. The girl objected, saying it's better to keep doors unlocked in case something happens. She pressed the button, but Mr. Parvalone insisted and locked the door again. He explained that if someone tries to kidnap his son at a red light, it's better to have the doors locked. Vanessa got his logic and stopped arguing, going back to her laptop screen. Meanwhile, Cody asked if his dad noticed the orange smell when he got close to the new nanny. She, on the other hand, was thinking about the no-password Wi-Fi and how he was giving security talks. Then the kid looked at her laptop and asked what she was doing there. Vanessa didn't explain and just pressed a button, and the glass between them and the driver went down. Adam turned to them and asked the boss why he needed him. But he didn't need anything, and Cody noticed his new nanny was pretty sharp and skilled. Then Vanessa pressed the button again and the glass went back up. After that, she turned to Oscar and suggested setting a password on the Wi-Fi if he cared so much about security. Mr. Parvalone squinted at her but understood she was right and agreed. A moment later, they arrived at the huge Parvalone mansion on the outskirts of Chicago. Adam immediately suggested Vanessa follow Oscar while he handled the luggage. The girl quickly scanned the place and was surprised there were no guards or even cameras. When entering the house, Oscar told her room was on the second floor, second door on the left. Then he turned to the kid and clarified that from now on he'd have to stay with her. But the kid preferred to be with his dad. Oscar insisted that from that day on, for any matter, Cody had to go to her. He also decided to take him out of traveling, and the kid just protested. Believing his dad saw him as inexperienced, Mr. Parvalone didn't want to drag him into this, but the kid insisted he needed to go. That made Cody so mad, he threw his drink on the floor and ran off. Oscar explained that without his mom, it was really hard for him, and Vanessa noticed the kid was way too attached to his dad. Then the girl asked if Cody really knew what Oscar did. The man asked if she knew. She remembered reading notes about his business and said she'd read some news but hadn't really gotten into his affairs. Oscar decided to explain more in detail, trying to be completely honest. The man admitted he was actually the deputy to the boss of the Parvalone Mafia. Vanessa totally got that being the right hand of the Mafia boss put him almost on the same level as the Don himself. That pissed Cody off so much he threw his drink on the floor and bolted. Oscar explained that without his mom, it was really tough for him, and Vanessa noticed the kid had gotten way too attached to his dad. Then the girl asked if Cody really knew what Oscar did, and the man asked if she knew. She remembered reading notes about his business and said she'd seen some news, but hadn't really gotten into the details. Oscar decided to explain more clearly, trying to be totally honest. The man admitted he was actually the deputy to the head of the Parvalone Mafia. Vanessa totally got it. Being the right-hand man to the Mafia boss meant he was almost on the same level as the Don himself. Then Oscar admitted he had tons of enemies, more than anyone else, and he was dead sure they'd do whatever it took to get to his only son. that kid was super important since he was the heir to the Parvalone name. Oscar wrapped up by saying that protecting the kid was exactly why he needed her, and the young woman promised to do whatever it took. That calmed Mr. Parvalone, who decided they shouldn't have any problems with that. Right away, Vanessa started asking about her responsibilities and listed some cybersecurity skills she had, but it wasn't necessary. Her only worry was Cody, though. She didn't imagine she'd have to play babysitter caretaker. Then she mentioned again that she didn't have a bodyguard and that the staff needed to be checked. Oscar approached Vanessa again and repeated that her only job was to keep an eye on his son. That's when the girl noticed the drink package thrown on the floor that Cody had left. Mr. Parvalone added that after the kid escaped, she had to track him. Vanessa agreed and immediately ran out to the street to look for the boy. But he wasn't anywhere to be seen, and then she heard him getting mad and yelling at someone. When Vanessa looked closer, she saw some men had already grabbed Cody and were pushing him into the van's trunk. She immediately ran after them, hoping to catch up and save the kid from the kidnappers. But the vehicle had already taken off, and she realized she'd have problems from day one, watching the van drive away. She instantly knew a kid had been kidnapped. Then she saw Mr. Parvalone standing in the doorway and didn't know how to tell him everything right. For a moment she thought she should run after the car, but knew it wouldn't help. She ran back inside to talk to the owner and take the necessary steps. He asked what happened, and she explained that several masked kidnappers had taken the kid. Mr. Parvalone grabbed her arm and pushed her to follow the vehicle. Vanessa had no objections, in fact. She was burning to save Cody. Grabbing her bag, she asked the owner for the car keys to move faster. But Adam was already running toward her. He'd be her driver on this mission and take her wherever needed. She promised Oscar she'd find the kid and asked him to alert the cops for now. But he leaned in when she was already in the car and said it wouldn't be necessary if she did her job right. A moment later, the car was speeding toward the direction the van had gone. The driver asked where to go, and Vanessa told him when to turn right or left. She also opened her laptop and decided to use a special program to track vehicles. She remembered the van's number well, and now planned to trace it, something she was an expert at. Adam got curious about what she was doing, and Vanessa briefly explained how she'd find the car while checking the cameras and confirmed the van had appeared just a minute ago. Vanessa felt like everything was going way too smoothly, and suspected it might be a trap. Then she told him to turn left, and after 2 traffic lights right to catch up. She also wanted to hack the nearest network towers to have more options to locate the car soon. She started mumbling what she planned to do, but Adam didn't really get all the tech jargon. Soon, Vanessa detected 3 phone signals inside the building they were approaching. As they arrived, they immediately saw the kidnapper's van, and she got ready to act. She told Adam to circle the building and wait on the other side until she came back with the kid. In front of the entrance was a bodyguard who looked professional, but Vanessa found it weird he didn't have a gun. As she approached, she warned him she was well trained and begged him to open the door. Politely, he leaned more against the door and refused to let the visitor in. In uniform, without wasting a second, the young woman sharply twisted his elbow, then hit him even harder in the solar plexus. The impact bent him in half, and Vanessa immediately slammed the edge of her palm into his neck. Then the huge muscular guy collapsed to the ground, dropped his sunglasses and couldn't move. For a moment, Vanessa entered the building and reached the kitchen, which was strangely empty, no cooks in sight. Seeing a round metal tray on one of the tables, RecapManhwa, she decided to use it as a weapon. A little further on the opposite side was another door with a round peephole cautiously peeking through. Vanessa saw a dimly lit room where a woman and a man were guarding tied up Cody. Immediately, the young woman, banging hard on the door, burst into the room and got ready to face the 2 criminals. They, for their part, they also got ready to fight and immediately took combat positions. Vanessa instantly raised the tray, intending to smack the guy, but he ducked just in time and she missed. That thug threw a punch at the girl, but she blocked it with the tray. He felt unbearable pain in his fist, and as he stepped back, Vanessa lifted her leg to smash her heel into his face, but the bandit dodged just in time and pulled his leg back, getting ready to counterattack. However, Vanessa didn't flinch and immediately slammed the metal tray into his head. While those 2 tried to recover from the hit, the girl didn't waste a second and ran to the kid. Without untying herself, she carried Cody on her shoulders and hurried out of the building. From the truck, the driver shouted excitedly, hyped that she'd pulled it all off. Sitting the kid in the vehicle, she held him tight like he was hers, then started untying the ropes and asking if he was hurt or how he felt. Seeing Cody lean forward, she remembered how she herself had been scared after the fire at her place. Vanessa hugged him again and assured him everything would be all right now and he didn't need to worry anymore. At that moment, Adam coughed a bit and it was clear he wasn't feeling well, but he still had one job left. The girl noticed something was off with him and got alarmed, but soon realized his intentions weren't friendly. The next second, she saw the gun pointed at her while Adam ordered her out of the vehicle. Then he added that if Vanessa left on her own, leaving the kid behind, she'd get $2 million for it. The girl took that as proof the guy was working with the kidnappers and now trying to finish what they started. Adam clarified he had nothing to do with the idiot's Oscar, hired to squeeze info. Vanessa now understood it was a test, and the driver added that the boss wouldn't lose sight of the kid and couldn't let such an opportunity slip. The young woman stood in front of the kid and promised she'd never let them carry out their plans. Still, Adam insisted she be smart and take the money instead of ending up with a hole in her head. Out of the corner of her eye, Vanessa spotted the open laptop and decided to use it. While keeping the driver distracted with conversation, she reached for the device and started searching for the right button. When Adam heard the nanny reject him for the umpteenth time, he got ready to pull the trigger and end her. Soon her fingers found the right spot, and without hesitation she pressed the button. At that exact moment, the windshield wipers kicked on, sliding with a soft noise across the glass. That threw him off a bit, and he turned around to check what happened. Vanessa just needed that, and without hesitation hit another button on the laptop. The glass separating the driver from the passengers rose up, trapping Adam's hand, who dropped the gun. Meanwhile, the woman grabbed the kid and pushed the vehicle door from her side. The next second, she threw herself backwards so Cody would be on top and not get hurt. Then quickly getting up, with the kid in her arms, she started running before Adam could free himself from the trap. On the way, she kept calming the kid, telling him they'd be home soon and that he was super brave for coming close to the house. Vanessa noticed Adam's car was already in the yard, and horrible thoughts flooded her mind, though. Then she saw that driver standing next to Mr. Parvalone like nothing had happened. At that moment, she broke free and ran to her dad. While Vanessa realized something was off, Oscar patted the little guy's head and praised the nanny for doing a good job, saying she was hired now. She understood that even Adam's dialogue was part of the whole plan, but he was just doing his job. Mr. Parvalone noticed he didn't do it very well since Vanessa escaped before he could shoot. Though the girl got a bit mad, she insisted again that for similar reasons the car door should have been unlocked. Oscar agreed with her, and Cody started praising her for being quick and for hugging him. Vanessa realized she'd involved the kid too, but she couldn't not warn Cody, or else he might suffer psychological trauma. Plus, Oscar wanted to see if she could be intimidated or bribed, and he liked the result. He explained that this had happened before with the previous nannies, and Vanessa promised to watch over Cody but asked for trust. Mr. Parvalone couldn't accept it since he trusted no one and nothing when Vanessa asked why. He admitted his wife had disappeared a year earlier, then pulled a ring the size of a woman's finger from his pocket, which was covered in blood. He added that the police left one thing out of the reports, that his wife had been murdered. Oscar's face looked really sad and broken. He even closed his eyes, remembering his wife. Vanessa noticed how little Cody blushed when his dad remembered his mom and understood the kid was hurting too. Then she asked the employer not to mention it now since it wasn't the right time. Oscar got what she meant and told the kid to go to his room, but he resisted, saying actually he was fine and didn't really want to go back home then. Vanessa looked at the windows and asked exactly where the kid's room was. He made a slightly annoyed face, not getting why the new nanny cared about his room's window. The girl then playfully guessed the kid's room was the one with lace curtains. Cody started denying it, and Oscar explained his son's room was on the other side of the house. Then Vanessa picked the one with flower pots. But the kid protested angrily again, then grabbed the nanny's hand and dragged her on purpose to show her which was really his room. While the girl hadn't left yet, Oscar told her she had to be in his office in 10 minutes. After that, she followed the kid, and his dad just watched her walk away. Adam, who was nearby, noticed he liked the girl and advised the boss not to scare her, but Oscar thought if Vanessa could be scared, then this wasn't her place. The driver came up to the boss and said it smelled like oranges. Cody, on the way, decided the nanny was trying to trick him, but she just wanted to see his room. Vanessa explained to the kid that from what she saw, she could form an opinion about him for Cody. It was unexpected since no one had ever told him that before, really. The girl was worried because he handled that kidnapping way too well. She was also glad it didn't affect him too much. Meanwhile, they got to the room. The kid said it wasn't set up because they just moved in and there was still stuff from the previous owners. Then Cody clarified it was kid stuff, but the nanny even liked those things. Still, she asked the kid not to show them if he didn't want to, but he thought it was just a room the next second. They entered a pretty spacious room with a serious mess. Right away, empty chocolate milk bags caught attention. Then the girl noticed Cody had way too many almost identical suits. Even more than a mortician. In another corner, there was a creativity corner that helped the kid deal with his inner emotions. Vanessa immediately thought the kid needed to cut down on sugar and diversify his wardrobe while the nanny wasn't looking. Cody quickly hid some toys under the pillows, feeling a bit awkward. He also justified the empty boxes, saying the maid didn't like him much. The girl smiled again, not understanding how that could be true. Since he was so wonderful, Vanessa even wanted to pet the kid's hair, but he rejected her right away. Then, looking from under his brows, he said pretty bluntly he didn't need a new mom, but Vanessa didn't even try. She knew no one could ever replace the kid's mom. She also told the kid she'd stop worrying so much about him. If he didn't like it, he just answered with the same annoyed tone, telling her to just keep doing her job. Vanessa tried again to please him and did what he said, but he reminded her it was time to see the dad. The girl understood that indeed it was time and headed straight to the boss's office. On the way, the nanny thought the kid was way too stubborn. But somehow it made sense. Shortly after, she was in front of the door and gently knocked on the wooden door. Oscar invited her in, and Vanessa immediately noticed that man had changed a bit in that setting, Mr. Parvalone. It didn't seem that scary for a deputy director, but Vanessa didn't waste any time and reported that she had left Cody in his room and asked if it wasn't dangerous. Oscar explained that if he was home it was normal and admitted he had pressured the nanny before. Vanessa didn't believe it was just a little danger, but quite the opposite. The boss promised he would get to the bottom of it no matter what. Vanessa meant that those who killed Mrs. Parvalone were now threatening her kid, and she was ready to protect the boy and fix everything so nothing would threaten Cody anymore. Oscar confirmed the threat started when his uncle, the Mafia boss, named the kid as the next leader. The girl pointed out that the contract didn't specify that her family was in danger. She added that those obligations weren't part of the signed contract. Vanessa understood that the boss hadn't read the fine print and decided to use that as leverage. Oscar reminded her that she had studied self-defense, but she shot back that she was fresh out of school and should hire a more experienced worker. Mr. Parvalone also resisted and claimed he had hired exactly the person he needed. The girl didn't immediately get what he meant and asked for a more detailed explanation. For a moment, she even thought this guy knew her past and suspected he had come looking for answers, but Oscar just clarified that he didn't need anyone else and asked what conditions. The nanny demanded to stay. Vanessa realized this mission was way more complicated than she'd signed up for, and he started proposing compensation options. The man suggested raising the salary, even though she had already thought about offering new conditions. While she stayed silent, Oscar kept throwing out different incentives, like a house in Mallorca or political contacts, but Vanessa thought all that was useless if she didn't get anything done and was curious why he needed her specifically. The woman asked the boss for full access to everything she needed. Mr. Parvalone asked for clarification and she added absolutely everything since it would help protect the kid. This request even seemed interesting to Oscar, and her work ethic gave the impression she was selfless. But Vanessa said she just wanted to survive this mission, so she wanted to use every possible tool. The boss thought it over since he couldn't give her a business account or client data. The nanny wasn't interested in his business and promised not to look at anything unnecessary. The conversation started to seem more fun to Oscar, so he asked her again to specify what she was looking for. Mr. Parvalone also wondered what she'd get out of all this, considering her meticulous attitude. After mentally weighing several options, Vanessa said she had an even more personal request. Then, after a deep breath, the woman asked the boss to leave her a guaranteed excellent review because she was risking her life for Cody. And if he ended up okay, she wanted her work properly recognized. She also asked Oscar to become a patron of an elite nanny academy. After hearing Vanessa, Mr. Parvalone thought her demands were pretty low, but she insisted and promised to fulfill it within a year when it was time to leave Chicago. Then Oscar looked at the nanny with a certain threat and said everything would be different if something happened to his son. If that happened, the girl would regret not dying while carrying out her mission. Even though Vanessa wasn't one to get scared, those words made her think a bit. The boss's vibe at that moment was so threatening she felt like he could punch her. But he didn't do any of that. He just told her to feel at home. When she left the office, she realized he was serious and you could see it in his eyes. Vanessa understood a guy like that would kill her slowly if she messed up, but she was well trained and knew elite nannies never slip up. Later, she found the driver in the hallway carrying her bags to the room, even though she could have done it herself, but Adam. Later, she found the driver in the hallway carrying her bags to the room, even though she could have done it herself. But Adam figured she'd had enough struggles for one day and was happy she'd be staying. He took the luggage up to the second floor, and at the same time suggested she tour the house, adding that it'd be her home for the next year unless something major happened. She watched the man and couldn't tell if he was on her side or not. Still, she took his advice and went to check things out. Noticing the place reminded her of a small palace, she decided to walk through the garden while checking the security level. By the nearby door, Vanessa spotted the guard she already kinda knew, same guy. The guard she'd knocked down recently while saving the kid. When she got to the hedge, the girl saw it was 10 feet tall with barbed wire on top, plus at some spots she spotted more guards just as big as the first one. As Vanessa kept walking, she noticed some nice stuff too, like small ponds, but this place where the kid used to play didn't feel like a playground. So she figured it'd be cool to take the kid to an actual park sometime. Heading back inside, Vanessa looked for her room and saw it was pretty spacious but didn't care about the fancy stuff. Taking the moment, she decided to grab her laptop. When she opened her bag, she freaked out seeing the laptop wasn't there and started trying to remember where she left it. Remembering recent events, Vanessa realized she'd left it in the car right when she jumped out with the kid. Peeking out the window, she hoped to spot it right away but didn't see the car in the driveway. Just then, Oscar came in and asked her to join him for dinner since the food was ready. Vanessa immediately asked how she could get her laptop back. The boss promised Adam would handle it, then got curious about the kid and learned he decided to eat in his room. She also wondered if this was normal, like if Cody usually didn't join the common table. Oscar explained the kid had been acting like that lately and the girl guessed it was because of losing his mom. The boss turned around pissed, saying he didn't need anyone's opinions, he knew his son well, and didn't want anyone messing with his feelings. He told the nanny again to just focus on the kid's safety. Meanwhile, Cody was by the door trying to eavesdrop on the adults' convo, but Vanessa heard a noise on the other side of the kid's door. Oscar didn't pay it any mind and hurried off to where he needed to be. Her heart broke realizing Cody had heard everything since he was so little. Then she headed to the dining room where they offered her a seat at a huge table. The food seemed way too much even though she was hungry. Sitting across from her was Mr. Parvalone, ready to eat and staring at Vanessa. Even though she was trained in protocol, she felt a bit awkward. At the academy, they taught her to keep formal convos with staff, so she decided to start one-on-one. She asked why Mr. Parvalone had come to Chicago. When she heard it was just business, it felt kinda weird. Since he wasn't part of the local mafia, that company didn't have influence here, and she knew the local mafia families wouldn't accept him. Vanessa figured a guy with Oscar's status could stir up some serious drama in the city. Her convo partner stayed pretty chill, agreeing since she was right. The nanny noticed Oscar showed no remorse, like he didn't get the risk he was putting his son through, but she didn't interrupt. Instead, she decided to ask the boss another question. The girl was curious about Oscar's goals for next year, but he didn't quite get her question. Vanessa clarified that if there weren't special plans, she could teach the kid A language or some other artistic skill? Mr. Parvalone hesitated a sec before answering like he was weighing the idea. Then she heard Oscar say he'd already thought about that, thinking it'd be good for the kid to learn something. Though he hoped Cody as the future Parvalone heir would meet certain expectations. Suddenly, the living room door swung wide open and a maid came in carrying a drink to the table. Vanessa found it kinda weird and sus that the maid showed up right at that moment. She noticed everyone here acted strange like ghosts even though she'd only run into the driver. She was also super intrigued that only she had been invited to dinner with the boss. Vanessa figured it was because it was her first day and decided to roll with that weird greeting vibe. The girl started asking what Cody did all day and found out his dad usually took him to work with him. She didn't think it was right for a kid and said it wouldn't happen again. At that moment, she noticed the boss's mood had shifted and he even clenched his fist tight. Then Mr. Parvalone ordered the maid, Julia, to leave them alone for a moment and got ready to clear something up. Vanessa caught the maid's mysterious look and once again realized there was definitely something off. Oscar stood up and asked the nanny to follow him to the door. The girl wanted to ask more, but he told her to keep quiet for now. Like always, the guard was there and Mr. Parvalone gave him an order with a gesture. The girl passed by the huge guy, thinking he'd been told to do something to her, but the guard stayed put, and Oscar grabbed her hand and dragged her in another direction. She was glad the boss hadn't scolded her in front of others, but also thought it was overkill. When they stopped, Vanessa started apologizing for saying too much, but Mr. Parvalone cut her off, saying she had nothing to apologize for and totally agreed with her. Then he asked her to act scared, but she didn't get why it was necessary. Mr. Parvalone repeated his request, gripping her hands tight, and she agreed. Then the guard watched as the boss shook the girl, who started screaming like she was about to die. After that, Oscar hid her behind a tree again and said he only had one goal for Cody. He was about to say it when a noise came from nearby and the boss fell down. A moment later, one of the guards appeared, blocking the moonlight with his huge body. The boss asked what was needed and learned there was a problem in the third sector. Realizing it wasn't minor, Oscar suggested talking later and went to handle business. Left alone, Vanessa tried to figure out why that man was so scared to talk in front of everyone. The next day, she heard Cody interrogating someone pretty aggressively. The kid said he'd find out anyway if anyone tried to steal from the Parvalone family. Peeking into Cody's room, she saw him interrogating a little duck under dim light. It seemed weird a kid that young was learning to interrogate suspects, but he called her anyway and invited her to breakfast, though he chose to eat in his room. Vanessa smiled, guessing the kid was just scared to eat human food in front of her. Cody didn't fully get what his lady meant about keys with human food, but it caught his attention and he decided to listen to the kid and promised never to tell anyone his secret. The boy didn't understand what secret she meant, and Vanessa explained he was actually a vampire. Also, she explained he didn't leave the house and only ate when no one saw his fangs, but Cody refused and said he wasn't a vampire, just that he didn't want to eat with her. Vanessa admitted she'd already eaten, so the kitchen was all his. Then she decided to leave him alone and asked him to meet her later downstairs. After the nanny left, Cody stayed upset for a bit, not understanding why she wouldn't leave him alone. Then he noticed the duck's fixed stare and told it to stop looking at him like that. After breakfast, Vanessa washed the dishes and was glad the kid ate outside his room. On one plate, she saw a vampire face with fangs drawn in sauce. She thought it was kinda bold, but still was happy the kid ate. While finishing cleaning, she heard someone enter the kitchen. Turning around, Vanessa saw a woman with an apron and knew it was Mrs. Kenneth. She immediately asked what the nanny was doing there, and Vanessa explained she'd now handle Cody's breakfasts and meals. Vanessa also promised not to get in Mrs. Kenneth's way, who noticed the new hire had cleaned pretty well. The maid came up to the cabinet, almost bumping Vanessa, and said Mr. Parvalone wanted coffee. While making the coffee, Mrs. Kenneth asked if the girl had slept well. And she lied, saying everything was perfect, but really the girl hadn't slept a wink because she couldn't, shaking off the thought that someone was constantly watching her. Then Vanessa asked the maid if she had seen her laptop because she urgently needed it, but Mrs. Kenneth didn't get what that tech was about and preferred she read a book instead. From the door came the master's voice asking about the coffee. Vanessa turned around and noticed how calm Mr. Parvalone looked still. She was sure he was faking, like nothing happened last night. Oscar caught the curious look on the girl's face and figured something was bugging her. She didn't say a word, just went to check if little Cody was okay. Meanwhile, Vanessa couldn't fully get her boss, who just the day before had wanted to tell them about his son. Approaching the kid's room, she heard him speaking fiercely to a baby duck and realized where he'd learned that while the boy stayed entertained. Vanessa decided to find out what happened to her laptop. Entering her room, she saw the device already on the nightstand. Vanessa wasn't lazy about digging around, so she took a free moment. Oscar hadn't told her anything about his past, so she decided to use a search engine. Opening her laptop, she immediately typed Parvalone crimes in the south of the country into the search bar. Soon she read that this family had been running a mafia organization for 100 years. Now Oscar's uncle was the boss, because his older brother died and left him in charge, but the uncle had no kids, so the nephew took his place. As lieutenant and Cody was the heir, now she got why that kid was so serious and acted that way. Vanessa decided to check what was said about Parvalone on the dark web and started typing fast. On some sites, she read that despite his short stay, he'd already made enemies, but Vanessa didn't get why he acted like that and got into so much trouble. Then it hit her that maybe Parvalone had no unfinished business left in the south. She heard Cody calling her the crazy aunt, but that didn't bother her. She quickly closed her laptop and went to see what the kid needed. Entering his room, she saw the baby duck already packed in the laptop bag and Cody was looking for something. The kid couldn't find his favorite tie, even though he was supposed to go with his dad to a night event. She realized Cody still didn't know his dad wasn't taking him, and started thinking about how to break it to him. She suggested staying home to play while Mr. Parvalone handled his business. But Cody was sure his dad needed his help because he was meeting people who hated the Parvalone family. That was new info to Vanessa, and she was curious how he knew. Cody also believed that when he was with his dad, he was underestimated, and that was their advantage. Suddenly, the kid started begging the nanny to back him up when his dad came. The girl didn't know what to say, and Oscar walked in, asking his son to stay with Vanessa. He planned to come back alone the next day, and thought it was safer for his son to stay home. This made Cody really sad, and he tried to remind his dad what his uncle wanted, but the man didn't budge. He insisted Cody stay home to be safer. As Mr. Parvalone left, he came up to the nanny and asked her to take good care of his son. At that moment, the girl decided to seize the chance and begged the boss to stay a bit longer. RecapManhwa. He didn't get what she needed, but chose to listen, thinking it might be important. Meanwhile, Cody fixed his eyes on the nanny, hoping she'd finally beg his dad to take him, but she said nothing about that and just asked again for access to the security system. At that moment, the kid felt betrayed and abandoned, like his last hope had been shattered. Oscar didn't have time for that now, but promised to talk to Vanessa about it when he got back. After that, Mr. Parvalone shut the door behind him, leaving the kid with the nanny, who was now mad at everyone. The girl decided to ease the mood and suggested they have dinner together, but Cody didn't want anything and told the nanny to leave him alone. Vanessa wanted to say more, but Cody shouted at the top of his lungs for her to back off. The young woman tried to convince him, promising they'd have a good time together, but the boy saw nothing fun about it and was sure his dad had left him behind. Vanessa had no choice but to bail on the kid's room, slamming the door behind her, kinda understanding what Cody was feeling now since she'd been through something similar. Memories of her childhood home burning flashed back, definitely not a fun vibe. That night, Vanessa couldn't catch a wink. She felt like someone was watching her again, checked the whole room for cameras but found nada. Still, that creepy feeling stuck with her. But hey, it was time to get ready and get back to her grind. Seeing her perfect room, Vanessa thought something nasty was lurking behind it all, but then she noticed the sunrise. She stepped out onto the balcony to soak in the morning rays, stayed there a few minutes, then headed back inside to check the search engine. She saw Cody was already chilling comfortably in bed, and the nanny invited him to breakfast. The kid kept refusing, so Vanessa suggested hitting the park after breakfast. Cody was still dodging his gross meals and had zero plans to go out, but suddenly got curious about the park. He asked the nanny for more deets, and she told him about an outdoor playground and mentioned there's a zoo nearby, though it stinks there. The kid admitted he actually loved Balboa Park, but Vanessa had no clue where that was. He explained it's downtown Ontario's with tons of trees, benches, and fountains. The kid also said he used to go there a lot with his dad to feed the ducks. Knowing the boss's vibe, Vanessa tried picturing that scene and agreed to go there with Cody, but only if they had breakfast together first. For a bit, Vanessa watched her charge feed the ducks with breadcrumbs. Meanwhile, he told the birds to chill and not fight since there was enough bread for everyone, but they kept squabbling. Watching Cody, the nanny realized this kid seriously missed his dad, who was gone all day. Soon, the kid got bored feeding the fighting ducks and tossed the rest of the bread into the fountain. Then he turned to Vanessa and asked for ice cream. She noticed it was almost lunch and didn't want him ruining his appetite. But the kid insisted this time, even saying please, adding that his dad always bought him ice cream. At that moment, the kid looked so cute, Vanessa couldn't say no, even if it was just one scoop. She pointed to an ice cream stand and invited him over. Cody objected, saying his dad always got it in the old neighborhood. Because they even had pistachio there, Vanessa agreed since the kid was craving that flavor, and they headed that way. That area was packed, looking like a tourist hotspot. When they got there, Vanessa ordered pistachio ice cream with chocolate chips for the kid. She spoke to the vendor in French and, seeing his reaction, realized she still had some work to do. In seconds, the cone was ready and the nanny pulled out her phone to pay with the terminal. Meanwhile, Cody stared at the ice cream, hyped to try it, but suddenly got spooked and bolted. Like he was being chased by a gang of bandits, Vanessa barely caught where he headed before he vanished into the crowd. She chased after him, trying to catch up, but he was gone poof around the corner. At first, she didn't get why Cody ditched the ice cream he begged for. She tried calling him, but no answer. Then, she started suspecting where Oscar's kid might be headed. Meanwhile, Mr. Parvalone was driving to an important meeting and decided to use the ride to think. Shortly after, the driver alerted him to an incoming video call and asked who it was. Adam replied instantly. His uncle wanted to talk, but Oscar wasn't in the mood to chat, not even with him. He just asked what his uncle wanted since he decided to call at noon. The driver didn't know the details, but advised not to keep his uncle waiting. Oscar agreed and told the driver to connect him, turning on his laptop, but he advised not to keep his uncle waiting. Oscar agreed and asked the driver to connect him. Turning on the laptop, Mr. Parvalone hit the button and his uncle popped up on the screen right away. The voice sounded a bit worried and Oscar thought something serious had gone down. Still, he asked about the progress, and his nephew admitted they still needed to coordinate with another group. Johnny listened and then begged Oscar not to start a war since he knew his temper well. these Mexicans knew their weapons. But not so much luxury goods, something that could be taken advantage of. Contacts with the lumberjacks and Chinese trade networks would also come in handy. Johnny got hyped about the news since they could soon leave their mark on the city. Plus, the Normans are eagerly waiting for Oscar to prep the ground, and he promised to do it right. Uncle Johnny didn't forget to mention that the future empire would belong to his son. He also told his nephew to never forget who this was all for, and the nephew promised again that it would happen. After that, Uncle Johnny asked to be informed when everything was ready, then asked about his son. Oscar briefly explained how things were going, and the uncle toasted to that little rascal. After the conversation, an employee entered Johnny's office with her blood-stained coat and announced they were ready. That news made the boss happy, who asked if it had caused many problems. He got ready to go, thinking this time they'd tell him something different, although he wanted something fresh. Listening to Johnny's predictable lies was already boring and exhausting. While the little rascals were busy, little Cody was carrying out his small crime. He ran away from the nanny, intending to find a vehicle to go see his dad. He had to run for quite a while until his lungs filled with air, but he didn't give up. He soon reached the bus stop and approached the first one he saw. The driver told him the bus was going to the station, exactly the place he was looking for. He paid the fare and headed to the cabin, where he found a comfy seat and sat down. Looking out the window, he noticed Vanessa running down the street looking for him and decided not to make himself noticed. At that moment, only one thing mattered: getting to his dad on time and reuniting with him soon. From his point of view, Vanessa saw it more like a game of hide-and-seek, since she fully trusted her skills. Cody, who had been walking for a while, noticed his legs were a bit swollen and stood up to stretch them. A few minutes later, he had already reached the right stop and got off the bus, but as soon as the kid stepped off the vehicle, he immediately recognized a familiar face in front of him. 8 minutes earlier, the nanny, confident she'd find the kid, quickly started planning her strategy. She mentally reviewed possible routes, looking at the stop where the bikes were parked. She also knew that even if Cody walked fast, that wouldn't last long. She also considered the bike, but still didn't know if the kid knew how to ride it. The best plan, in her opinion, was to travel by bus or taxi, where she'd only have to pay the fare. Then she closed her eyes to better clear where Cody might have gone. Even more, the kid probably chose the fastest route to reach his goal. She also remembered how he rummaged through his stuff to find the handkerchief he'd used to meet his dad. But that day, Mr. Parvalone decided to leave the kid at home for the first time in a long time, and now the nanny was sure Cody was heading to find his dad to be with him. Then Vanessa overheard a conversation between some girls talking about a kid in an adorable monkey suit. The girls were happy that kids here could travel safely on public transport. Vanessa understood they were talking about Cody, and immediately asked which bus he had gotten on. Surprised, the girl got a bit flustered, but the nanny repeated her question, this time more gently. Then she confessed she had seen the kid get on a bus going to the station. The nanny understood the kid was heading to the intercity train station about 15 minutes away. Now she was ready to show what she learned at the Elite Nanny Academy. Soon Vanessa saw a man with a bike that had a front basket where a little dog was sitting. She approached him and kindly asked to borrow the bike. While the man was distracted by the charming young woman, she remembered her little dog was still in the basket. Vanessa also realized they'd both miss each other and immediately returned the dog to its owner before leaving. He promised to leave the bike parked and took off. The girl pedaled down the road, weaving past cars coming from both directions, and they were honking at her. When she got to the bridge, she found heavy traffic and knew she'd lose way too much time if she tried to avoid it. So Vanessa decided to flex her parkour skills, sliding across the bridge and then hopping over a baby stroller. Seconds later, she landed on the sidewalk, freaking out the pedestrians, but she didn't have time to care. She wasn't paying attention to them because she wanted to catch up to the kid. Meanwhile, as the nanny was biking, Cody was still on the bus. Getting closer to his target, he felt like the trip was dragging and got pretty bored on the ride. In no time, Vanessa had already reached the station and was scanning for the bus she needed from afar. The public transport hadn't arrived yet, so she still had time to stash the bike. She found a discreet spot near the stop and walked the rest of the way. The girl had one more minute before the bus showed up and got ready to confront the little runaway. That minute flew by, and the bus pulled up to the right stop. Cody, sitting there, was getting ready to get off and stretching his legs before stepping down. Lost in his thoughts and clueless, the kid went down the bus stairs. Vanessa was already waiting for him at the stop, and with total seriousness, she was about to talk to him. Cody got genuinely scared, seeing the nanny right in front of him, not understanding how she found him so fast. The girl just leaned in and asked where he was planning to go alone, then grabbed him by the collar and warned him he wouldn't be getting any more ice cream after that. Cody tried to break free from her grip, but couldn't, and got mad because she'd wrinkled his suit. Vanessa assured the kid that the wrinkled suit was the least of his problems right now. He kept trying to get loose and yelled for the nanny to let him go. Without hesitation, the girl yanked him by the jacket and the kid instantly fell. Landing on his butt, the boy felt a sharp pain but now cared about something else. He started yelling at Vanessa that he hated her, and she admitted it hurt her a lot to hear that. Cody cried and curled up on the ground, still blaming his nanny, saying it was her fault his dad wouldn't take him. But Vanessa pushed back, saying her job was to protect the kid, and also explained how dangerous his actions were. The boy kept insisting, claiming that now his dad was in danger too. The nanny tried to calm Cody down, saying his dad had plenty of bodyguards around, but he saw them as traitors. The kid shouted that after what happened with his mom, Dad just couldn't trust any of them. Cody repeated Uncle Johnny's words, that you can only trust family, so he was trying to protect his dad. Vanessa understood that according to the kid, the bodyguards had deliberately let his mom die. She tried to soothe him, saying the guards did everything they could, but Cody disagreed, saying she really didn't know anything. The girl didn't actually know how his mom was killed, but she understood how he felt. Still, Vanessa decided to convince the kid he was wrong and that despite everything, she knew something. She sat beside him and honestly admitted she wasn't like those other guards promising she'd protect him with all her might, even if she had to save him from himself. She explained he could hate her or even fight her, but running away from her wouldn't be possible. The kid protested, saying pretty confidently he'd keep trying to escape. Then there was a silence for several seconds and they just stared at each other. Even though Cody had no other choice, he obeyed the nanny and went back home with her. After dinner, Vanessa as usual took care of washing the dishes while the kid asked to go to his room. Of course, the nanny kept him close even though he swore he wouldn't run away anymore. Vanessa had no doubt she wasn't, taking her eyes off him until his dad arrived. A little later, Vanessa put him to bed and turned off his room light. To make it less intense, Cody wasn't asleep yet, wanting to wait for his dad to tuck him in. When she got back, the girl promised the little guy that as soon as she saw her boss, she'd pass on Cody's wish immediately. Then she left him alone, and he pulled the blanket almost over his head, feeling like he'd had a rough day. Vanessa. She felt like it had been a pretty busy day too, and tired, she decided to sit down for a moment. The babysitter settled right under Cody's door, remembering that she hadn't slept at all the previous nights. The exhaustion was even worse, but she couldn't let Cody slip away again. Her eyelids, however, grew super heavy, and Vanessa decided to close her eyes for a moment to ease the fatigue. Without realizing it, the girl fell into a deep sleep so hard that she didn't even hear a thing. Curled up like a ball, Mr. Parvalone found her under the door. Without touching the sleeping babysitter, he decided to check on his son and headed to his room. The kid hadn't fully fallen asleep yet, just started dozing off and heard his dad had come back. Oscar leaned over him to confirm he was there, and Cody mumbled that he missed him. The dad asked the kid how his day was with the babysitter, and he admitted he almost got away from her. Then the kid added that Vanessa was dumb and that he tried to escape her to help his dad. Oscar got curious about how his son knew where he was, and it turned out Adam always input the GPS coordinates ahead of time. Mr. Parvalone noticed his son was sharp, and he also confessed that he'd overheard the guard's conversation. That showed the dad how alert his son was, and he felt proud of that trait. Then the kid also admitted Vanessa caught him, didn't let him out, and brought him back home. Oscar's time to leave had come, but he promised his son he'd see him again when he woke up. He wished the kid good night, left the room, and gently closed the door. There was still one task left, and the man had to do something with that ball of sleep on his lap. However, he didn't rush and started by putting back on the shirt he'd taken off earlier. The shirt was stained with blood, and Oscar didn't want his son to see him like that. After looking again at Vanessa, in that position she seemed less dangerous than a kitten. Also, Mr. Parvalone understood that despite everything, his son was safe. He leaned toward the girl and tried to wake her gently with soft words, calling her quietly. The babysitter heard the boss's whisper by her ear, opened her eyes, but still didn't have the strength to sit up. Vanessa could only turn her head toward him and made out that he really was back. Then, Oscar helped the girl up and was about to walk her to the room so she could lie down properly, but Vanessa didn't want the boss to worry so much about her and said she could walk alone. He didn't argue and let go, but as soon as he did, the babysitter almost fell again. Oscar didn't flinch, caught her again so she wouldn't get hurt, and insisted on walking with her. Vanessa knew she was super weak, and after 2 sleepless days, she'd lost a lot of strength. The boss didn't scold her because he knew Cody just wanted to see him. RecapManhwa. The babysitter slipped a tracker into the kid's shoe, something Oscar thought was pretty smart, holding the girl who was falling asleep while walking. Mr. Parvalone got to his room in no time. The girl buried her nose in his clothes and noticed a pretty nasty smell. Vanessa instantly recognized the smell. It was the boss's blood. Oscar just gave a small smile as if the smell wasn't as pleasant as oranges to her. Then, Vanessa pushed him and tried to enter the room alone, holding onto the furniture. She just kept muttering that little Cody had to be kept away from all that. Oscar leaned over her and asked her not to shout about it if she wanted to live. The girl was surprised her words came out so loud. She didn't realize it because of the fatigue, though she knew perfectly how her words sounded when she yelled. The boss didn't want to argue more and just recommended she get a good sleep, but she couldn't sleep in that house. Even though she was about to collapse from exhaustion and longed to get to bed, she tried to explain to the boss that someone was constantly watching her for some reason. The next moment, the babysitter was already in bed and couldn't say a single word. At that moment, only one thought filled her mind. She needed to sleep even a little. Surprised that Vanessa had realized she was being watched, he figured she had good intuition, something he liked since it would definitely come in handy. He knew the girl still had a lot ahead of her, but he decided to let her sleep. The next day, Vanessa was glad she finally got some rest. And now she felt less tired after remembering how Mr. Parvalone had walked her to her room, and she felt kinda awkward too. That night, none of her internal alarm signals or danger signs went off at all, which she found pretty weird. Since Mr. Parvalone was exactly the guy she should have been most scared of, but after spending some time with them, Vanessa realized they weren't what she thought. Not even Cody seemed like some victim who needed saving and protection. Mr. Parvalone, the Mafia affiliate, didn't look like a villain at all. She knew he was just looking out for his kid's safety. But for some reason, he brought him to Chicago, which was basically a hornet's nest, and thinking about all that made Vanessa more and more sure that something was off, even though she couldn't quite figure out what. Then she remembered again. The moment the boss woke her up outside Cody's door, and thinking back, the girl even felt a little embarrassed for feeling something at that moment. She wasn't supposed to forget the Academy's rule about emotional bonds. There was no time to get distracted. Vanessa knew she had to find answers and planned to remind the director about full access. And this time she was hoping to get it. She decided her heart had to turn into an unbreakable rock against those Mafia guys. So caught up in that, she didn't notice Cody right away. He zoomed by on an inflatable duck and almost made her trip. The kid was running so fast he wasn't even turning properly, crashing into the duck on the curves. Vanessa decided to find out ASAP what was going on, and where little Cody was rushing off to so fast. Meanwhile, the nanny kept calling him to stop and talk to her. Chasing after him, Vanessa reached a yard with a big pool and several lounge chairs, and on one of them she saw Mr. Parvalone, chilling comfortably in the sun. His solid physique and top-notch fitness left her momentarily stunned when she saw him. Oscar explained that it was pool day and they weren't going to do anything else. Plus, he wanted to rest after the craziness from the night before, when he spotted a strange car near the entrance again. Oscar wasn't sleepy yet and sometimes peeked out the window. And there he saw the weird car. It had stopped near his house for the third time that week. Mr. Parvalone didn't find it that strange that the mysterious watchers didn't even try to hide. Meanwhile, he was drawing his own investigation board on the map, marking all the events. And shortly after, his work started paying off and a clearer picture began to form. Looking again at the map and the marks, Oscar even thought he might have crossed a line. Then he went to tell his little son, who couldn't wait to spend time with him. Mr. Parvalone promised the kid they'd definitely hang out the next day. And now that they were chilling by the pool, Vanessa still didn't get why the pool was always in the yard that day, and anyone could come swim and soak up the sun anytime. Then Vanessa noticed Cody, who jumped into the water from a height, making a huge splash with his bomb jump that even soaked Vanessa a bit, almost drenching her, but she took advantage of Oscar spending the whole day with his son and asked for system access again. Vanessa chose to start with a preliminary vulnerability analysis and suggestions for improvement. Mr. Parvalone just smirked with disdain and said the girl didn't get it at all. He took off his sunglasses and set them aside, then got closer so she could hear him better. Oscar repeated once more that today was pool day and nobody was supposed to do any work at all. Then he headed to the pool to cool off and chill in the sun for a bit. Vanessa still couldn't figure out what this had to do with her since she wasn't family. Just then, the driver showed up at the doorframe, and she immediately realized the nanny was seeing an event like this for the first time. The girl guessed it was something scheduled at a fixed time, but Adam clarified those days were totally random. Then he handed the nanny a towel, saying he'd brought it, especially for her to join in. Meanwhile, the driver noticed it'd be hot in her uniform, so it'd be better if she changed. Vanessa looked back at Mr. Parvalone and thought she couldn't stay chill around him now. She started explaining to the driver that she really had a lot of work and couldn't stay there, but Adam, he decided to explain in more detail, adding the reason why he wouldn't cross that threshold. The deal is whoever goes out to the pool on a day like this can't just come back. He still couldn't wrap his head around what kind of weird rule this was, but that was the whole point of pool day. The driver clarified that Oscar and Cody eat at the pool and also crash there. The nanny still didn't want to join in, but at that moment Mrs. Kenneth showed up, assuming Vanessa had agreed. Without crossing the threshold, Mrs. Kenneth asked Vanessa to bring coffee to Mr. Parvalone. Vanessa didn't want to accept it and tried to pass by Adam, but he blocked her way to the exit. Realizing she'd get nowhere, the nanny asked for a computer but found out tech wasn't allowed that day either. Then Cody came up and suggested diving with him for a ring, thinking it'd be fun later. Behind her, she heard Oscar's voice hinting that running away wasn't an option. The kids shouted right away that pool day was sacred, and the nanny had no choice but to change. Mr. Parvalone pointed to one of the doors, explaining it was the changing room. A little later, dressed in her swimsuit, Vanessa realized her plans to get answers that day had failed. So she decided to try to vibe with Cody so he wouldn't treat her so distant when she got near the water. She saw the kid holding 3 rings and invited her again to play. Meanwhile, Oscar, sipping coffee, watched his son and the nanny with interest. Vanessa was ready to jump and she'd add a little flair. Instantly, she was moving, her hands through the air and diving fast into the water. Parvalone watched curiously as the young woman executed a perfect head dive. And seconds later, when the nanny resurfaced, she had a ring in her hand. Cody immediately asked if his dad had seen everything, and he nodded. Then the kid told the nanny he'd get the next ring before her. In the next moment, both were underwater, each trying to grab the ring fast. Surfacing, the kid noticed something was definitely missing. While underwater and focused on catching the ring, the nanny took advantage and snatched it from him. Now she was even teasing him in a childish tone, trying to play, but that just made him madder. Though he didn't insist on pulling him off the float, he soon joined him lying on a lounge chair. Oscar noticed he was having a good time, while Vanessa noticed he was super active while the adults rested. Cody kept splashing in the water, not wanting to get out at all. Then Oscar remembered that recently the girl had been eager to access his security system. It seemed suspicious, so he decided the nanny had hidden motives to get close to him. Hearing that, Vanessa stopped chewing her sandwich since the boss had promised her full access. After hearing that, she leaned back on the lounge chair, like a model, and asked if that full access was enough. It was a joke on his part, but Vanessa, who'd always known him serious, couldn't believe he was joking. For a moment she thought her boss had been replaced, and now in front of her was a completely different person. At the doorway the driver appeared again, Adam, and asked to talk to him. Adam never bothered him before, so he got up immediately and went over to find out what was going on. Vanessa even thought that after the fuss Mr. Parvalone would just leave, and Cody noticed it too. Adam briefly summed up the situation and advised the boss to see for himself. But Oscar couldn't leave since today was pool day. Still he heard his son's words, who also advised him to go. Mr. Parvalone even felt a little relieved seeing his son understood and wasn't mad, so he agreed. Before leaving, he turned to Vanessa and asked her to watch the kid. He soon disappeared behind the doors, and the girl noticed her boss seemed a little scared. Vanessa totally got that something had happened, something bad, but didn't know exactly what. Shortly after, Mr. Parvalone, following the driver, headed to one of the perimeter sectors. Near the entrance, while walking, he asked Adam if he'd managed to see the license plate of the van that had stopped again in front of his house. The driver admitted he was in the kitchen at the time, but was sure those people had been watching him for a while. When Oscar arrived, he saw a torn, bloodied teddy bear hanging on the perimeter bars and asked Adam to check for explosives or tracking devices and then get rid of the doll. Meanwhile, Vanessa noticed the kid had gotten sad and suggested playing the ring dive game again, but Cody was already bored with the game, so the babysitter suggested coming up with something different. Vanessa decided to guess his favorite things, and if she got it wrong, Cody could push her into the water. Even though the kid thought it was dumb, the girl went for it and suggested starting with his favorite animal. Cody just looked at her curious while the babysitter put on a thoughtful face, then tried to guess which animal he liked and said giraffe, but that wasn't Cody's favorite. And he cheekily pushed her into the pool. Looks like the kid was actually enjoying the game, and now invited her to guess his favorite food. The girl was sure she knew the answer. After all, she was his babysitter and couldn't not know. She mentally ran through all the dishes the kid had eaten enthusiastically and said asparagus, but Vanessa was wrong again, and Cody pushed her into the water once more, this time with extra hype. The girl did a flip in the pool, pretending to be surprised by the push, which made the kid laugh even harder and stop hiding his childish giggles. Then he confessed to the babysitter that she wasn't as bad as he'd thought before. The young woman spotted Mr. Parvalone behind Cody and realized he had come back for something other than swimming. Seeing the babysitter's look, Cody turned around and genuinely got happy his dad was back, even though he needed her. Meanwhile, Mr. Parvalone suggested his son call Adam if he still wanted to swim. The girl didn't waste any time and got out of the water immediately, since she herself wanted to know what was going on. She immediately asked the boss what had happened, but he didn't want to talk about it in front of his son. Taking off the cloth from his neck, he threw it at the babysitter's face and ordered her to be in his office in 10 minutes dry. Considering the time she was given, Vanessa understood she wouldn't get a chance to go to her room and get ready. Meanwhile, Cody told the babysitter that Adam didn't want to swim with him because he didn't like getting his hair wet. The girl found that pretty interesting, and a bunch of thoughts ran through her mind about it. But then she leaned in to the kid and asked him anyway to tell her his favorite food, even though he didn't get why she cared. Vanessa smiled kindly and explained she was going to make dinner and also wanted to treat the little guy to a dessert. Then, Cody admitted he loved a frozen dessert like snow but with berries and nuts. The girl realized the kid had played a trick on her but promised to get that dish for him, and he happily ran off to change. 10 minutes later, Vanessa was already knocking on the boss's office door, who loudly invited her in. Mr. Parvalone was sitting behind the desk staring seriously at something on his laptop. He asked the babysitter to come closer and check one of the camera recordings from about an hour earlier. The girl didn't even believe there were cameras inside the palace since she hadn't seen any. Oscar explained the cameras were only outside, but she wasn't sure he was telling the truth. Still, now she had a chance to access the system, even though she hadn't imagined it like this. Watching the video, the girl realized there was an intruder on the property. Then she saw a super creepy sequence that genuinely terrified Vanessa. On the screen, it clearly showed the blood-stained teddy bear caught on the barbed wire. The babysitter immediately recognized it as a threat, and Mr. Parvalone totally agreed. He also said the threat was specifically for Cody, but that was exactly why he was there, to protect him. Vanessa had zero doubt about his skills and felt ready to handle the situation without hesitation. She noticed the figure on the fence wasn't the kid, meaning the intruders hadn't gotten into the house. They kept checking the other cameras, thinking someone might have filmed it somewhere, a muscular guy holding the bear. The babysitter popped up on the laptop screen a bit later. She noticed something else and asked the boss to zoom in on the villain's shoulder, but even at max zoom, the image wasn't very clear, so she admitted knowing a better program. Oscar handed her the laptop and she grabbed it right away. Totally distracted by a drop of water sliding down her hair, the drop fell onto Oscar's shirt, who thought the babysitter hadn't dried her hair properly. Vanessa didn't pay attention, and in just minutes, she had everything ready, zoomed in again, and now you could clearly see the criminal's tattoo. The babysitter knew what they were. Tattoos like that are done in Russian prisons after 2 sentences. Oscar thought her knowledge was insane, but she in turn found it wild that he'd made enemies in just a month. Then she figured the Mafia boss Parvalone was having serious problems with Russians too. She also guessed her boss had stepped on their turf without realizing it or had something they needed. When the babysitter asked again what he'd forgotten in Chicago, he explained he was just starting to meet people and influence folks. She wasn't joking though, but Mr. Parvalone decided it was his turn to ask questions. He was super curious how the babysitter knew so much about organized crime. He started demanding seriously where she got knowledge beyond her babysitting duties. The girl choked on her words, realizing she'd revealed too much and now had to cover herself up. She claimed she'd done research before taking the job, but Oscar didn't buy it since barely an hour had passed. Vanessa tried backing up her story, saying a lot was public info, and she'd read it. Mr. Parvalone couldn't take it anymore and slammed his fist on the table since this was his turf. Then he asked again, and she confessed they taught that stuff at an elite academy. Oscar still didn't believe the babysitter, and with every passing minute she seemed more sus. He grabbed trembling Vanessa's shoulders tight and demanded she tell the truth, or he'd fire her, then added he'd never let a liar protect his kid. The girl knew this was a make-or-break moment and had to say something to her boss. Oscar couldn't find out she was actually investigating her parents' murder. At that moment, Mr. Parvalone squeezed her shoulders even harder and gave her 5 seconds to answer. Vanessa thought she could take him down right then, but that'd just mean losing, because they'd fire her immediately and she wouldn't get answers to her questions. With a slightly shaky voice, she confessed to Oscar she might be in big trouble later. He didn't get that Vanessa was threatened by something bigger than him, and asked her to explain. The babysitter admitted she'd have problems with the law, the academy, and everyone, and it'd end badly for her. Mr. Parvalone still didn't believe her and guessed she belonged to some gang. Vanessa didn't expect that, and was shocked her boss thought that of her. He added the babysitter worked for a syndicate or competitors and had come to spy on him. Then Vanessa screamed scared that she was just a freelance. Oscar realized this girl was a mercenary. The girl noticed her boss didn't fully get it, tried not to laugh, and lowered her head. The babysitter went on explaining she was a freelance hacker and sometimes did illegal stuff. Then added those people are called black hat hackers whose main problem is money. She kept up the story and said no one got hurt because of her actions. At that moment, Oscar remembered the day his son was kidnapped and the moves the babysitter made to find him. She also started explaining her job wasn't that complicated if you knew the trade secrets. Vanessa didn't deal with criminal orgs, syndicates, or gangs. She just sat in darknet forums where you can find out absolutely everything about those groups. Oscar was curious if her director knew, and the woman asked him not to tell Barbara. Seeing the boss's expressions, Vanessa noticed he was starting to trust her again. He promised to keep quiet, but his face showed a look Vanessa didn't like at all. And she wasn't wrong, because right away, Mr. Parvalone asked the babysitter to find someone for him Danes. He expected it wouldn't be a tough task and asked who exactly needed it without saying a word. Oscar grabbed the laptop with one hand, clearly pointing at the criminal he wanted to find. This wasn't hard for Vanessa, but for the job she needed a copy of the video. Oscar handed her a tablet, loaded with all the necessary files, and let her start while he personally took care of the kid. Leaving the boss's office, the young woman thought about how quickly he had trusted her. Either way, she accepted any job he offered in exchange for her silence. Plus, Mr. Parvalone gave her a tablet connected to his network because you don't just hand over data to any hacker, and the nanny thought she could run another check. She swiped the screen to unlock it while still wondering if she were in his shoes. Would she have given the hacker access to the data and then checked what they'd do? She noticed a program logging everything done on the tablet elsewhere. Vanessa decided not to let her employer down and was determined to do everything to impress him. For her, it was a super simple task. She saw more like a show. Meanwhile, down south in the boss Johnny's office, he called one of his trusted employees. The guy named Simon looked really shaken and said some problems had popped up. At first, Johnny thought the dude was talking about his outfit, but that wasn't it. Though he didn't skip mentioning he might try switching up his style to something more comfy. Johnny honestly did not care one bit and annoyed spat a seed shell into the container. Simon noticed his boss was pissed but still had to spill the tea. He was tired of staring at the trembling employee and ordered him to explain what happened. Then Simon admitted the mirror program caught some unusual data input, but Johnny wanted it dumbed down, so Simon clarified that apparently Oscar had found their spy program. However, Johnny knew his nephew wasn't some computer whiz who could spot that program so fast. Then Simon added there were background programs running on the tablet, and Oscar might figure out what the boss was looking for. Still, Johnny saw no problem since he made it specifically for his nephew. Yet the employee feared Oscar might accidentally delete the spy program, but Uncle Johnny was sure his nephew wouldn't do that and went back to spitting sunflower seeds, then nervously tapped the can on the table. Even though he didn't seem hyped, Johnny was convinced Oscar wouldn't mess with his plans, no matter what they were. Not long ago, the boss had given his nephew a lesson he wouldn't forget anytime soon. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept typing on her laptop to search for info. First, she planned to set up a web-based facial recognition scanner and would expand it if needed. She was sure the villain's mask couldn't fool that program, and even if that person lived a hidden life, sooner or later they'd show up on cameras. While searching, Vanessa decided to check on Cody, when suddenly an alert popped up saying a match was found. The girl found it weird. Everything happened so fast, but decided to immediately check what the computer had found. There she saw a photo of that guy, twisting into different poses in front of the camera. Vanessa noticed the villain even had his own Facebook account, which surprised her a lot. The guy was totally not shy about recording himself on camera and often uploaded his photos and videos. Watching them, the girl felt like she'd noticed something and dug deeper. Meanwhile, Cody was watching the street from the window since he wanted to see what was going on. He saw Mrs. Kenneth carrying a bottle of cleaning product and a towel somewhere. At that moment, Adam suddenly grabbed him by the neck and told him it wasn't smart to stick his nose where it didn't belong. Cody took it as a threat from the driver, but Adam clarified he was just quoting a saying. The kid broke free and ran off. Determined to investigate a case with the duck, Meanwhile, Vanessa kept digging through the info when she heard the boss's voice behind her. Turning around, she saw Oscar holding a plate of food he'd brought her. He explained she'd just missed dinner, but Vanessa was more worried if Cody had eaten. The boss assured her his son was being taken care of by Mrs. Kenneth, then noticed Vanessa had already found the criminal. The girl admitted. RecapManhwa, she'd found him faster than expected but noticed something missing in the photos. The nanny opened a pic where he was shirtless and asked the boss to look closer. There was the same shoulder, and Oscar immediately noticed the kid was missing the tattoo. Still, he didn't get what it meant and thought maybe the system glitched, but Vanessa insisted it was him, and that he didn't even have a twin since she checked the hospital records, Mr. Parvalone. Then figured the villain must have gotten the tattoo recently, but the nanny reminded him the guy had also served 2 sentences recently, then mentioned the photo was 2 weeks old, so if he'd gotten it recently, it'd still be healing, even though Oscar insisted it wasn't him. His physical build, from bones to muscles, matched perfectly. Then she clarified he was the guy they were looking for, just that his tattoo wasn't real. She guessed the villain knew he'd get caught on camera, so he planned everything. Plus he turned his head but not his shoulders, like he wanted to show off the tattoo on purpose. Then she realized that man was pushing him on purpose toward the gang. But that wasn't all she found. She told him the kid was born in Tijuana, a city in northern Mexico. Oscar understood this was the work of a Mexican gang he'd almost finished negotiating with. This crushed him, and now he saw them as shady dudes he should never trust. Then he asked her to locate the kid, which was easy for her. Meanwhile, Mr. Parvalone felt glad he'd done the right thing hiring this girl. Vanessa didn't fully get what her boss meant and hoped he'd explain more, but he didn't add anything else. Just thanked her and asked to be notified when she finished. The girl pressed Oscar, who admitted he'd sized up her skills well, and that was a compliment. She replied she took the job only because the director herself insisted on it. Then Vanessa started wondering why Oscar chose her, but he told her to think it over herself. Then she said he'd recently accused her of lying, even though he knew her skills perfectly. Oscar explained her resume mainly highlighted her IT skills. The girl grabbed her head because somehow her boss had figured out she was a hacker and forced her to admit it, since her resume specified her skills were only for network security. Then she guessed they hired her so Oscar could expand the criminal syndicate's capabilities. At that moment, their talk was cut off by Cody, who suddenly burst into the room demanding answers. The kid wanted to know what was going on, but the adults assured him nothing bad had happened. However, the boy didn't buy it, which made him sad, and he even threw the duck on the floor. Then he asked again why Adam wouldn't let him go out, and the maid came out with bleach, heading toward the main doors. Plus now there were 2 guards behind the back door instead of 1, something that hadn't happened before. Cody also noticed these 2 whispering to each other and demanded again they explain everything. Oscar clarified Adam was just keeping the kid clean and that the second guard was in training. Plus, Mrs. Kenneth was always cleaning something and went back to talking to Vanessa about her duties. The young woman understood everything the boss said but didn't like how he talked to her. But Mr. Parvalone had already picked up his son and added that the main responsibility of the nanny was to protect him. Then Oscar turned to the nanny and asked her to confirm everything he said. Spoken to his son, the girl remembered Barbara's instructions. First, she had to care for and protect the kid and obey the boss. Now, no matter how much she wanted to add something, she remembered she couldn't break the contract and had to act if there was a threat to Cody. And now he confirmed the boss's words, protect the kid. Vanessa had to do it even if it helped her dad. Sure, the current situation wasn't exactly her vibe, but mostly she was thinking about Cody, and the elite babysitter was ready to protect him from anything. Putting all her effort into it, she tried not to pay attention to Oscar. Maybe he'd try to take advantage of the situation. Left alone, the young woman got back to work and stayed in front of her laptop. Until way late, when everything was set, she headed to the boss's office. She knocked softly on the door and didn't have to wait long because he opened right away. He asked what she'd found. The babysitter reported that all the places where that criminal had been spotted weren't connected to his house or legit business. That seemed pretty convenient to Mr. Parvalone, and you could tell he already had something cooking in his mind. Still, he also understood that after all, the Mexicans probably had bigger worries and would forget about their family. Oscar moved over to his investigation board, though the babysitter preferred not to know the details. After marking a few more spots on the map, the boss asked if the woman had anything else to say. Vanessa wanted to coordinate drawing classes for Cody with him. The next day, she believed the kid had talent and needed to develop it. So Oscar decided to send Adam with them. At first, he thought they'd travel by train, but Mr. Parvalone stood firm on his decision. Then the babysitter left, and her boss noticed she was starting to treat him differently again. Still, he needed that woman and didn't focus on her changing attitude. More importantly, he couldn't get distracted from his main mission, so he marked more points on the map. The next morning, Vanessa went to the kitchen to cut an apple for her little charge, shortly after Mr. Parvalone showed up wanting to ask Mrs. Kenneth to make him some coffee. But she wasn't there. Instead, Vanessa was in the kitchen and decided to make herself a drink. While prepping, she mentioned that some pretty interesting news was trending online today. During the night, weapon stashes were found in Mexico, and they lost almost $1 million in merchandise. Oscar smiled mysteriously, thinking earlier that stuff didn't interest the girl, but then he quickly tried to calm the babysitter down, assuring her it wasn't his doing and that he had nothing to do with it. Seeing Vanessa didn't buy it, he explained he didn't have enough people to pull off something like that. The girl got that it sounded believable, though she still had some doubts. Later, while sipping the already prepared coffee, Oscar confessed he had the number of Ivanov's grandma. That confession shocked Vanessa because that old lady had a solid rep. Ivanova wasn't just any grandma she controlled. All the group's organizations in Western Europe. Then, Mr. Parvalone also told the babysitter that the Russians had a lot of respect for their tattoos. After finishing the coffee, Oscar left the kitchen, wishing her luck with the drawing class. Left alone, Vanessa thought about how that man had more connections than she'd imagined. After a while, the babysitter had already arrived at the building with Cody, though the kid didn't see the point. He thought he could just paint at home, but the girl hoped he'd find new friends there. Cody believed he didn't need friends, but Vanessa insisted they at least try. Soon they were surrounded by people who only admired the boy's suit. About the girl, they thought from her uniform that she was from Great Britain and that she was probably sent there on purpose. Meanwhile, Vanessa advised the kid to be nice to everyone, even though he thought the world wouldn't thank him for it. At that moment, the girl even thought that his act was dooming innocent kids to run into him. As soon as Cody got among the kids, they immediately started asking who he was and if he'd been to church or a party. The boy figured the kids thought that because of his outfit, though not every suit is just for parties. Then he proudly said he wore the suit to keep the family's honor clean. Parvalone arrived, then another kid named Clark showed up and told the others not to bother the new guy. He himself offered Cody an apron to wear so he wouldn't get dirty. Cody carefully checked out little Clark's outfit and thought his dad was a sailor. He objected and said his dad was a dentist and one of the best. Then Cody, he asked how that kid supported his dad's initiatives, and without hesitation he flashed a smile and admitted he loved it, brushing his teeth. Right then the teacher turned to the kids and suggested they draw something for their parents. After class, Cody met up with the babysitter again, who immediately started asking how his first class went. The kid just mumbled, sounding annoyed, that he'd have to come back next week. He explained Clark needed to get better, working with shadows, and suspected he was colorblind. In the car, the driver started grilling the kid about what he'd drawn. But Cody hadn't made that drawing for him today, so Adam was hoping the kid would create some kind of masterpiece for the teacher next week. Then he decided to share with the kid what he really liked, a lot when it was done in mosaic. Suddenly the driver went silent, noticing something off in the rearview mirror. Vanessa caught it too and kept pressing, asking what he'd seen behind them without giving many details. Adam just told the passengers to hold on tight, then slammed the gas, making Vanessa and Cody slam back into the seat. The woman asked Adam to explain, but he wanted to be sure first that his suspicions were right. Then the babysitter looked out the car window and saw they were probably being followed. The driver realized his sharp move hadn't shaken off the tail, so he started planning the next move. He had to ditch those people at all costs and protect Cody. He pulled off several more maneuvers, but the dark car wasn't backing off at all, and the babysitter got more worried by the second. Luckily, there were barely any cars on the road, and Adam sped up, tearing down the street. He also planned to drop off the passengers quickly, then distract the pursuers. Cody wanted to know why they couldn't go to Dad's, but Adam knew it wasn't safe for those people. To get to the mansion, Vanessa thought if a shootout started, the kid could get caught in the crossfire, so the babysitter unbuckled her seatbelt and told Cody to get ready. He understood she was gonna jump out of the moving car again, but assured him Adam would slow down. The driver made a sharp turn down an alley, where there was a good spot to drop them off. Without hesitation, the babysitter jumped out, holding the kid tight. The young woman hid behind a corner, hoping the chasing car wouldn't see them. Soon after, the car appeared and sped past without even slowing down to look. There Cody felt like they were safe now and let out a relieved sigh while the babysitter peeked out to check the situation. The kid wanted to say something, but she covered his mouth with her hand to keep him quiet. A dark car showed up again in the alley where they'd hidden, and the babysitter noticed it was a different car. But she also realized this car was looking for them and feared the first car had seen her jump. However, the second car just passed by, without spotting the young woman and kid hiding behind the corner. Vanessa also breathed a sigh of relief at that moment, since they hadn't been found after all. Then she let go of Cody's mouth and he wondered who it had been. But the nanny didn't know, still considering everything Vanessa suspected who might have been chasing them. Then she took the kid's hand and suggested heading back home, plotting a safe route at the same time. Meanwhile, Mr. Parvalone was giving instructions to the guards on what to do next. Soon he noticed the nanny and her son walking closer to the house. The kid, seeing his dad, ran up to him, pushing Vanessa aside without saying a word. Oscar noticed his son looked a little scared and hugged him, asking if he was okay. Adam had managed to contact him earlier and told the boss everything, but he wanted to know what happened next. The girl admitted there was a second car, but they managed to hide and nothing else went wrong on the way. Cody, however, said they'd seen the neighbor's lawn full of garden gnomes, something he thought was terrible. Oscar figured that scared the kid more than the chase and sent him inside to change. Vanessa approached the boss, saying this time it was all real since they'd made enemies for sure. The young woman noticed Oscar felt guilty, even though he wouldn't admit it. Mr. Parvalone decided to beef up security, while the nanny on her end planned to cancel their drawing classes. All the girl could do at that moment was minimize the damage. Because what's done is done. Cody came back with them, totally forgetting something he was supposed to give his dad. The kid had drawn a picture for him and just couldn't not hand over his artwork. There was Cody's mom drawn right there, and Oscar noticed the painting was really nice and looked a lot like his wife. Then the kid turned to the nanny and promised her he'd draw her next week. The girl wanted to explain to the little dude that next week He wouldn't be able to attend his classes, but Oscar put his hand on her shoulder right then, signaling she shouldn't say anything about that. The painting itself, Mr. Parvalone wanted to hang it in his office, and Cody decided to find a frame for it. When the kid left again, Oscar turned to the nanny and ordered her not to cancel the classes but to stay with his son. Of course, the girl couldn't argue even though she wanted to, because she longed for the kid's safety. So she went back to her chores and Mr. Parvalone got ready to make a phone call. He dialed his uncle's number, waited for him to pick up on the other end and got ready to talk. The nephew's call caught Johnny off guard. It was a bit unexpected, but he needed help. He asked his uncle to send Nick and Anna even though they'd previously agreed on a minimum number of people. Oscar explained the situation in the city was heating up and those two were now really necessary. Johnny understood it was about conflicts between Russians and Mexicans and hoped his nephew wasn't involved. But Oscar assured him he wasn't into that stuff. It was just the group's actions making him uneasy and he needed more people. In response, Johnny offered his nephew a doctor but said she didn't do dirty work and figured the doctor would find something to do herself. So there was no need for her to be there. The uncle agreed, but Nick and Anna still had things pending and wouldn't be able to arrive until next week. After wrapping up, Johnny didn't forget to ask about Cody. When the call ended, Oscar thought his uncle knew about the chase and at the same time was thinking about the Mexicans. Then he saw the driver arrive panting and learned he had escaped those people too. He also asked the boss about Cody and the boss said they were safe and at home. Oscar thanked the driver for doing his job well, but the guy said he was just doing his duty. Adam suggested they should thank Vanessa since she was a champ at jumping between cars. The driver thought the boss had gotten lucky with her, despite where he found her. Mr. Parvalone figured luck had nothing to do with it, so he trusted his gut. Looking out the house window, Oscar noticed the nanny was there watching him too close to nightfall. Vanessa settled on the bed with a tablet and found something else. There were no files on Oscar's network, older than a couple of months. There was also no mention of a fire in his family, and she understood that data might be deleted periodically. Now it made little sense to access the network, but then she decided that anyway. That organization had to store their data somewhere. Maybe the data wasn't saved locally, so she started tapping the screen again with her finger. Later, Vanessa remembered the mirror program and decided she could try accessing the data through it. She knew perfectly well that if the data wasn't on the network, it meant it was sent somewhere else for storage. She used her hacker skills again to find out where that data was going. After a while of hard work, Vanessa finally discovered something: a bigger network with strong firewalls and fake IP addresses. But it seemed Oscar didn't have access to it. Still, she decided to find out who was behind it and who was collecting the data through the mirror program. She decided to start by preparing a little gift for those mysterious collectors. A week later, Vanessa went back to the drawing classes with Cody and asked him to behave properly. But the kid refused, saying he couldn't behave well because he considered himself simply magnificent. She'd noticed his unshakable confidence for a while but hoped he wouldn't screw up. As soon as she walked into the classroom, she immediately threw the apron at Clark so his clothes wouldn't get dirty now. Cody noticed this kid was wearing a gardener's outfit and he explained that his mom picked his clothes. Then he entered the classroom. A man with a mustache holding a paintbrush asked the kids to introduce themselves right then and there. Another nanny asked Vanessa how long she'd been working and she found out it was barely 2 weeks. That shocked the one asking because the young woman in uniform looked super professional. Olivia, the nanny, was her name. She'd been with the same family for 8 months. But the kid she cared for still hated her after the drawing. Olivia had to take him to piano lessons and then tennis, and the whole way the kid cried. The girl under her care also didn't want to do Latin homework and only ate yellow food. Plus, the girl always called Olivia by the previous nanny's name. Vanessa understood how tough it was, but she had her own mess to deal with too, like running and hiding from pursuers. Still, Vanessa also saw some good moments in her job and always tried to keep her spirits up. Suddenly and without warning, the classroom window glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The shards flew everywhere and some even stabbed into Vanessa's face. But she cared more about Cody. Without thinking twice, she ran toward him. The classroom and saw a man already holding the baby in his arms, threatening the others with a gun. The other kids freaked out and started crying right away since they were way too young for this kind of stuff. Vanessa didn't back down and started rushing to knock down the villain with one hit who dared to do that, but noticing the nanny getting closer, he ordered her to stay put or the kid would get hurt. The girl stopped but still asked him to drop Cody so it wouldn't hurt the kid as much. The kid himself screamed at the nanny, hysterical, knowing she might get hurt too. She noticed something and immediately a shot rang out, followed by blood flowing from Vanessa's hand. It was Olivia who decided to handle it herself and take out the professional nanny from the equation. Then she fired again. And this time Vanessa fell to the ground, stopping all movement. The man with the kid tried to flee fast while Cody screamed at the nanny, thinking she was dead. Olivia caught up with the crook and suggested backing off so the family driver wouldn't see anything at that moment. Vanessa started to regain consciousness, though her head was spinning. As she got up, she staggered down the hall, leaning on the wall, and tried to find Cody. Adam appeared, having heard the shots, and managed to hold her before she collapsed. He asked about Cody and, seeing the nanny was hurt, decided to stop the bleeding first. Vanessa thought it was just a superficial wound. Then she pulled out her phone, whose signal showed the kid's location. At that moment, he was underground near the river, and the driver suggested sending the geolocation immediately to Mr. Parvalone. Meanwhile, Adam was bandaging the nanny's hand, but she suddenly refused to wait for her boss and decided to go find Cody right away. Asking Adam to catch up, the driver insisted she wait, but she was already running toward the nearby tunnel. Plus, Vanessa knew she'd get there faster on foot because she couldn't wait to find Cody. Shortly after she reached the right tunnel, but the grated doors blocked her way. They were locked with an old rusty heavy padlock that made things even tougher. But the girl decided to test her strength and immediately kicked the padlock. Luckily, it was so rusty it broke on the first hit and Vanessa got in. She was almost there and wanted to finish fast. But everything was still blurry in her eyes. Moving a bit further, she saw the kid tied up with rope. RecapManhwa, who immediately warned her about the danger. Right away, the man who'd taken the kid appeared and again waved the gun in front of the girl's face. But she decided to use her skills without wasting time and immediately grabbed his hand, then squeezed harder with one hand, and with the other pressed hard on his fist to snatch the gun. Now she was threatening the thug with the weapon and ordered him to stay still or he'd die right there. Suddenly she heard Olivia's voice saying that line was hers. Vanessa immediately turned to her, but the badass warned her not to do anything stupid or the kid might get hurt. And the girl started asking who they were and what they wanted, but Cody shouted that it was a Mexican gang, and the boy was also sure that those men wanted revenge on his dad for being the top gangster. Olivia revealed that Oscar decided to take control of their business in this area, but the boy shouted again that they were just opening a store and told the thugs to back off. Then his dad's voice was heard delivering what he thought was a solid speech, and everyone turned to Oscar. He didn't come alone. Nick and Anna were by his side, and now they decided to handle everything themselves. Vanessa hadn't seen them before and asked Mr. Parvalone who they were. Meanwhile, the girl noticed those guys looked like pros and knew their stuff. Anna softly criticized them for getting into trouble on day one and got ready to fight. Nick recognized Cody, his favorite little gangster, and threw some friendly words at him. Mr. Parvalone said he really missed those two and their ways and attitude. The villains started yelling for them to go back south, since this city was already taken, but Oscar doubted that considering they couldn't even keep their gun warehouses. Vanessa watched and noticed her boss trying to rile up the thugs. Olivia added that even though the gang was with Oscar now, sooner or later they'd change their minds. Cody just shouted again that they'd do whatever they wanted and that badass would see what happens to their enemies later. Olivia tried to threaten the kid, but Vanessa stepped in immediately, saying she wouldn't do anything. She understood they didn't intend to shoot to kill, otherwise they'd have killed her as soon as she walked in. Then Vanessa realized that place was their main base, and they hadn't expected to be found so fast, but after losing so many hideouts, it wouldn't be smart to start a shootout there since the cops would ID them right away. Meanwhile, Nick and Anna whispered about how smart Vanessa was. Plus, Oscar had already filled them in on that. The badass Olivia, however, wasn't gonna put up with that attitude anymore, and told the nanny to shut up. Meanwhile, Mr. Parvalone, watching the convo, decided to make a proposal, suggested no guns, and to settle this like civilized gangsters. Nick noticed it was just 4 against 8, plus they had an injured nanny. Anna even called it cowardice. But Olivia didn't want to look weak, and asked that they drop their weapons first. Vanessa thought in this situation, it was better to play it safe since she didn't want Cody hurt. Mr. Parvalone put his gun back in the holster and set the safety on. The thug who'd kidnapped the kid was sure he could take these people down barehanded. Immediately, Olivia ordered the rest to take out that group fast, and they jumped into the fight. At that moment, Vanessa, wanting to protect Cody from danger, grabbed him again and jumped to the side while keeping the kid under her protection. The others had already started a no-mercy fight. Mr. Parvalone and Anna defended themselves pretty well from the first hit, not giving their opponents a single chance. Nick wasn't far behind and skillfully used techniques against badass Olivia. At that moment, one of the Mexican base guys headed toward Vanessa, and she got ready to defend herself despite her injury. As soon as he got close, the young woman landed a hard kick and the dude hit the ground immediately. But she knew that wasn't enough, so with all her momentum, she pressed her foot on the thug, crushing him harder against the floor. Meanwhile, Oscar and his helpers kept dealing with the remaining thugs, who turned out pretty tough. The nanny decided it was safer to get the kid out of there and immediately strapped him on her back. Just before her nose, another thug who'd been handled well by Nick passed by. Before Vanessa reached the exit, all the members of the Mexican gang were already pinned to the ground. Cody jumped up immediately and ran to his dad, non-stop praising him for handling things so fast. At that moment, Nick approached Vanessa and noticed that as a nanny, she fought pretty well. Anna noticed the woman reminded her of someone strong but couldn't remember who, and asked if Vanessa had been in Buffalo. The woman tried to say something but then started to fall to the ground, and Nick barely caught her just in time. He realized the girl had lost a lot of blood, while Oscar ordered the bandits to be taken to the stable, leaving that task to the assistants. He picked her up in his arms and insisted on taking her to the car himself. He really wanted this girl to rest since he saw she had done more than enough. The nanny was really exhausted and couldn't say no to the boss's request. When she opened her eyes again, she saw she was in bed with her arm and head bandaged. Her whole body hurt, and the one who showed up, Nick, explained that Anna had stitched her wound. But she wasn't a doctor. The girl didn't understand who Anna was. And he explained she was his partner and then introduced himself too. She already knew well who Vanessa was, the one who flies cars and takes bullets. The girl thought it was just her job like hers, but Nick doubted they were the same. Still, he visited her to warn she needed to rest at least one day. Vanessa was still worried about Cody, but now was watching TV with her dad. When he left, Nick realized Oscar had decided to beef up security and apparently knew those guys well. The nanny was also a bit worried about the rest, but decided not to waste time with the tablet. She tried again to use the mirror program to find the entire database. Soon she discovered a whole network of devices, security cameras, personal computers, and so on. There were also dozens of accounts. But she finally managed to find the main complex in the south, though the girl was still interested in knowing where they kept their data and realized it could be a remote file. Then Vanessa typed Albuquerque into the search bar and kept checking info. Almost immediately she saw that in that file, there were over 200 files with different stuff info about races, jewels, and gambling, among other similar things. Those files stored transactions spanning several decades, and Vanessa came to a conclusion. Analyzing all this, the girl realized her parents were also mobsters, and that didn't make her happy, of course. She suspected her parents were criminals who were apparently laundering money, moving cash through casinos and races, and sending jewels to the black market. But then at some point, all their business got out of control, and that brought tragic consequences. Then Vanessa decided to narrow the search, to find the info she needed faster. But suddenly the screen went black and a warning sign appeared instead of the image. The girl realized someone had disconnected her from the network but didn't know who or why. She also thought it could be a hack and decided to seriously tackle Oscar's cybersecurity. At that moment in Albuquerque, a young guy surrounded by several monitors considered the hacking attempt a solid effort. It was Simon who now wondered what the intruder was looking for and how they got into his house. The thief Vanessa, after finishing her job and meeting Julia, asked where Oscar's new people were. She said they were in the kitchen and Nick and Anna were just discussing their next plans. When the nanny came in, Anna was a bit surprised she got up so early. Despite her injury, but she really wanted to thank them because without their intervention, Cody could have suffered a lot. The nanny also thanked them for the support, but Anna assured them they were there exactly for that. Nick also confessed they had been figuring out how to avoid similar situations in the future. Vanessa admitted her mistake going back to drawing classes, since it was obvious they could be followed, so they expected an ambush there, which made her a little sad, and the nanny didn't want to keep being predictable. But Anna quickly calmed her down, reminding her it was Mr. Parvalone himself who decided to keep the classes going, and Nick added that now that they were there, Vanessa didn't have to cover for him anymore. The girl was curious about how long those two had been working for Mr. Parvalone. Anna immediately shared they had been on the same team with him before he became the boss's right hand. The guy added that Oscar appointed them as his reps before sending him to Chicago. Vanessa was a bit surprised when they told her Mr. Parvalone had only been named vice president the previous year. Vanessa remembered that during that time his wife disappeared, and then he was immediately named deputy director. The nanny thought it was a pretty weird set of circumstances, but Anna advised not to mention it to anyone else. Seeing his reaction, Vanessa realized they were hiding something from her, so she started asking why the deputy director was leading such a small team, but she didn't finish her question because she noticed something in the closet. She approached the slightly open door and realized it wasn't fully closed by accident. She instantly changed the subject and apologized to Anna and Nick for her ridiculous thoughts. Then she admitted she still had to prepare cooked eggplants for Cody's breakfast from the closet came. An immediate childish complaint about that dish. Realizing she wasn't wrong, Vanessa quickly opened the closet door and greeted the kid. Cody was sitting squeezed between the dishes and understood that his spying plan had been discovered. Nick lost his balance and fell out of the closet, while Anna decided it was time to get back to her business, but before leaving, Nick decided to smirk mockingly at the kid for his bad luck in the situation. When Vanessa and Cody were alone, she immediately explained that eavesdropping on other people's conversations was inappropriate, but the kid started showing he already knew what they were talking about, which surprised the girl a bit. Then Cody admitted that last year some bad dudes came and took his mom, and the kid's dad decided to become an assistant to get stronger, find her, and save her, both the kid and his dad. Mrs. Parvalone and Oscar simply couldn't trust the cops to look for her, but no matter how hard he tried, all their searches failed, and that hit him hard. Cody also said that the dad and his men only managed to recover his ring. And then he started crying. The girl felt really bad. The kid hugged her and advised her to cry a little so she'd feel better, but Cody thought he was already a man and men don't cry. So he wiped his tears and calmed down. Plus, Mr. Parvalone told his son they wanted to take him too. But the nanny promised that wouldn't happen, though the kid doubted it since Vanessa didn't know those people and couldn't stop them seeing bad stuff happen to them. Often Cody decided he had to be worse than those things. Vanessa was shocked to hear such reasoning from a little kid, understanding how tough it was for Cody. She also hoped that one day he'd become the boss's right hand and find those who took his mom. RecapManhwa. She also wished to make sure those people never dared to take moms away from anyone. At that moment, Vanessa remembered that one night Mr. Parvalone had started talking about a goal for Cody. But then Oscar didn't finish that talk, and now the girl was starting to realize what he meant by that. Vanessa totally got that it was going to be way harder than she could have imagined. Meanwhile, in Albuquerque, Simon, noticing the system attack, was thinking about how to fix the situation. He went to the doctor's room and knocked on the door, hoping she was there. Squad. RecapManhwa. She really was home and soon opened to her visitor, asking right away why he showed up out of nowhere. But Simon needed the boss and suspected he'd be in the doctor's office. She suggested he come in to see if the boss was there, but he'd rather not see the scene that'd make him sick. Then Johnny popped up at the door and asked what was going on, that he had to drop his work. Now Simon immediately reported that someone had hacked their encrypted servers and it looked like one of their own. The boss pointed out Simon's job was to stop that. and Simon said he'd already cut the network, then added his network was unbreakable but they were still pulling data from the files. The employee checked the logs and the Chicago package, which for some reason was bigger than usual. Simon figured someone was trying to inject a malicious file, but the boss told him to speak clearer, so he explained someone had messed with the mirror program and hacked them too. He also showed that the programs at the Chicago branch were updating faster than he could keep up. Plus, there were tons of security tools, like they were trying to hide something. Johnny thought it was sus that Oscar had decided to bring his men back right at that moment. Then the boss decided his nephew had chilled out a bit and needed a reminder who was running the show. Johnny immediately thought about what plans he had for Oscar while Mr. Parvalone was chatting with Anna in his office about pending business. She was interested in some contacts in the city and promised to ask around, hoping to get a lead. Right then Oscar's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he saw it was a call from his uncle. Oscar politely asked Anna to step out since the call was super important. Left alone, Oscar answered and asked right away what made him call with such urgency. His uncle straight up told him about a new mission and planned to send the instructions ASAP. Oscar opened the message on his tablet but decided to reject it since it wasn't his responsibility. However, Johnny assured him he was wrong, and that the right guy was actually up north, plus the uncle was sure this job was for Oscar. Then asked why he was beefing up his security. Johnny suspected his nephew wanted to build a new base, but he denied it, and also said he needed Nick and Anna for that. Then the uncle directly warned Oscar that someone had updated his internal network without permission. The boss hinted his nephew was snooping through his data, and Oscar got that Vanessa was involved, but Uncle Oscar just said he had a new specialist, and probably went a bit too far, but he'd fix everything later. Johnny reminded his nephew he couldn't hide from him and assigned him a new top priority task. The next day, Cody got kinda bored because his dad told him to stay home until the nanny felt better. The girl didn't want the kid to be bored and suggested playing something except swimming. Cody asked what games she had in mind, and Vanessa started listing a few, including hide and seek and riddles, but all the games sounded boring and lame to him. So he laid back on the couch again, then suddenly got up and happily shouted. He decided what to play and suggested a spy game. Vanessa tried to guess if he meant spying on his dad, but the kid pointed to the guards in the yard. They'd just finished something out there, but Cody was sure those guys were up to something and took the nanny with him to the window outside. A bunch of workers were running around with boards and shovels and nothing looked sus. But the kid was convinced of his theory and hoped the nanny wanted to find out what the workers were doing too. Vanessa agreed and Cody got hyped, adding they'd need ninja masks for the game. Shortly after, with balaclavas on their heads, they crawled down the hall trying to walk super quiet and low-key hidden. Suddenly, Mrs. Kenneth walked by and promised them that no one would find their bodies if she found out they'd been in her room. Then the nanny and the kid moved up to the window and Cody saw a bunch of branches like the workers were building something. Vanessa scanned the initial structure and suspected it might be a garden tool shed. But there's a separate room in the garage for inventory, and now Cody was deep in thought. Wondering why they'd also need a shed, she also thought it was totally unnecessary to hire an elite guard team for the construction. Suddenly Anna showed up behind them in a bikini and suggested Cody and her go for a swim together. He was hyped about the idea and immediately ran off to change into his swimsuit. Vanessa, noticing Anna's curious look, tried to explain she was just messing around with Cody, but Anna just told the nanny not to get involved or ask unnecessary questions. Then Anna told the nanny that Oscar wanted to see her and that she'd take care of the kid for now. She decided not to keep Mr. Parvalone waiting and soon knocked on his office door. He opened right away and invited her in, seeming way too nice at first. Oscar asked how her shoulder was doing. She said everything was fine and the bullet hadn't grazed the bone. Then the boss thanked her for keeping her promise to protect Cody even at the cost of her own life. But honestly, she did it instinctively without thinking, since first of all, Cody was just a kid. Then, Vanessa noticed the convo was getting casual and asked what the boss wanted from her. Oscar didn't hesitate and asked the young woman to find someone for him, something super important. Vanessa instantly guessed a new threat had popped up and looked out the window at Cody in the pool. But Mr. Parvalone wasn't talking about his son this time. He needed to find someone else and handed the nanny a photo. Looking at the person's face in the picture, Vanessa noticed a resemblance to Oscar. It was his cousin, and Sir Parvalone figured he was in danger. He added that this had nothing to do with Cody now and asked the nanny for a favor, even though she'd sworn not to help, unless it was about the kid. But seeing the boss's genuine pain, Vanessa decided to accept because she could help someone. She said she'd only do it once and that was enough. Politely, he thanked her right away. Later, Vanessa worked with Cody again, and this time they did chemical experiments and made a little volcano. Cody wanted to know why it exploded, and the nanny explained it was possible with the right mix of reactants. Cody said it reminded him of Nick and Anna, who were pretty explosive too. Then, Nick showed up with Oscar and said it was dangerous even without his partner. Mr. Parvalone was about to leave, but first needed to talk to Vanessa. The girl immediately understood what the boss wanted to ask and took off her latex gloves, pulled a little paper from her pocket and handed it to Oscar, pointing out that the info he needed was there. She also added that the person was currently in San Luis, so the boss thanked her right away and ordered Nick to get ready, since they had to leave in 10 minutes. Then Oscar leaned toward his son and promised that when he woke up in the morning he'd see him back. The kid asked what was so special about San Luis, but his dad didn't mention anything notable, just told him not to blow up the house. Cody joked maybe the kitchen, but that was something to discuss with Mrs. Kenneth. The dad also told him not to go into the garden while it was under construction. At that moment, Vanessa looked out the window and saw that although the shed looked finished on the outside, work was still going on inside. She saw them digging out a lot of dirt and guessed maybe it was for a very deep foundation. Vanessa also understood she probably wouldn't figure out what was really going on in that house. Then she noticed Cody was about to pour the reactant into the volcano and yelled at him to put on his safety goggles. That night, Mr. Parvalone's car arrived in San Luis and soon they were at the spot. Nick guessed the person should be there right now if they were following their usual routine, but Oscar was sure though Nick told the boss to be careful. Since he still didn't fully trust Vanessa shortly after they actually arrived at the parking lot where they had stopped, the vehicle they were waiting for Adam turned to the boss and confidently said it was definitely that person. Then he asked about future actions, but Mr. Parvalone just calmly ordered the driver to open the trunk and he prepared himself. 45 seconds later, Oscar was already receiving Richard, his cousin. Surprised because he didn't understand how they had found him, the boss explained that you can't hide from family and then along with Nick caught him. Richard begged to be let go and not to be harmed, saying he never wanted anything to do with the Parvalone. But Oscar ignored him. He just threw him in the trunk, even though Richard insisted it wasn't too late to let him go. But Mr. Parvalone really couldn't do that even if he wanted to, he was just following orders. Crouched over the closed trunk, Oscar paused for a moment, wondering if he was doing right by his own family. His thoughts were interrupted by Nick, who told him to hurry up since someone might have seen them. And they didn't need any extra complications. Mr. Parvalone stood by the trunk a bit longer thinking about what would happen next, and finally concluded it was time to bounce, even though he just wanted to keep the promise he made to his son. Several more hours passed before Mr. Parvalone's car pulled up to his mansion again. Meanwhile, Vanessa still hadn't gone to bed. As usual, she had been staring at her laptop screen and heard a car approaching. When she peeked out the window, she realized this time the driver didn't drop Oscar off at the front door like always. Meanwhile, Adam and Nick had already pulled Richard out of the trunk wrapped in a blanket and struggling, and were about to hide him. The street was pretty dark, and she could only make out a lump they were carrying toward the shed. The driver still found it weird that Mr. Parvalone liked having the kidnapped man in his own backyard. Vanessa was trying to figure out why they were acting like this so late. At first she thought they were just working, then suddenly felt a hand on her shoulder and jumped, so much that she literally jumped right away. The nanny reflex kicked in. She spun around hard, grabbed the hand on her shoulder and tried to twist it. At that moment she saw Mr. Parvalone right in front of her, whom she called just by his name without realizing it. However, she apologized and he started asking why she was there, and she explained she decided to check something out because she heard a suspicious noise. But Oscar noticed the only suspicious thing here was her, though his tone softened as he suggested maybe it was just because for some reason the girl didn't feel like sleeping. Vanessa immediately apologized since she didn't want to worry him, and asked permission to go back to bed. She understood she might fall out of the boss's favor, but he just let her go and wished her a good night. Locking herself in her room, she leaned her back against the door and even found it hard to breathe, because sometimes Oscar got way too close. However, she calmed down a bit and lying down remembered his wish for her to sleep peacefully. But now, even if she wanted to, she couldn't fall asleep until she figured out what was going on. The next day, Vanessa tidied up Cody's room a bit and gathered his drawing supplies. Then with that box, she went to find the kid to offer to draw again. In the hallway, the nanny ran into a stranger who noticed her bandaged arm and offered help while Vanessa watched the visitor. She also recognized she had come to visit the patient. At first, the nanny thought the doctor had come because of her arm, even though Oscar hadn't said anything about it. Panda smiled disdainfully and explained Vanessa misunderstood her and that she was actually there to see another patient. She even looked at the nanny in a way that reflected something threatening and warning in her eyes. However, Vanessa decided to inform her employer about her arrival first before letting her in. But then Anna showed up like she'd been waiting for her and declared she'd handle this herself. Then the girls greeted each other and the babysitter realized they already knew each other well. Anna walked up to Vanessa and asked her to go check on the kid, assuring her everything was under control. Meanwhile, the boss, Parvalone, kept thinking in his office, staring at the loaded syringe. The door swung open right away, and Nick told the boss that the long-awaited guest had arrived and was waiting for him. This news hyped Oscar up a bit, since he didn't want to wait any longer and decided it was time to move to the next step. Anna offered to stick by his side and led him through the whole house to grab the key to the master's shed. As they got close to the door, a crew member started banging and immediately announced that the doctor had arrived. In a nearby room, Vanessa heard someone in the hallway trying to get her boss's attention, so she decided to check what was up and peeked carefully through the door. Seeing Anna with the visitor, noticing the nanny's behavior, Cody also decided to find out what was going on. But Vanessa didn't let him out when the girl shut the door again. The kid got curious why Anna couldn't get into his dad's office where he should have been. Vanessa thought there was some truth in the kid's words and realized those people were cooking up something. Cody started struggling again against the door, eager to check the situation. But the nanny wouldn't let him through, thinking he might cause trouble right then. The girl also remembered Anna's words when she told her to do something with the kid. Now Vanessa got that. Anna was basically hinting she should stay out of it to distract the kid. The nanny suggested making a nice card for his dad, since his birthday was the next day. Anna on her part couldn't get the message to the boss because he had gone down to the shed and asked Nick to give a signal if anyone showed up. Nick wanted to help though, since he had to protect the boss. But Oscar didn't want his subordinate tangled in all this. Mr. Parvalone totally understood that not even he could protect himself. Stepping inside, Oscar found himself in a half-dark room with nothing but a single door. That door hid a compartment in the shed underground like a secret hideout. Then Mr. Parvalone started going down, turning on a single bulb to light the way. Down there sat Roger, tied up with his mouth sealed by tape and seeing his cousin. He tried to say something but only came out with incoherent babbling because of the tape. Oscar didn't want to hear anything from his cousin right now. He just got closer to the prisoner and apologized for how things ended. Moving behind Roger, Mr. Parvalone added that in this situation no one could escape. Not even his cousin. Then he leaned close to Roger's ear and told him to be grateful for what he was about to do. It's payback time for Oscar's cousin since he's got no family. To punish for his mistakes. The boss prepared a syringe and at that moment heard Nick yelling from upstairs, over the top at the doctor that they were waiting for her downstairs. Mr. Parvalone didn't wait any longer and jabbed the needle straight into the prisoner's neck, pressing the plunger. Roger couldn't resist anymore and only had left to accept his future fate. At that moment, the doctor's legs appeared, coming down the stairs, but Oscar had already finished his job and stashed the syringe in his pocket, entering. Wanda guessed Mr. Parvalone was already expecting the actions he planned to take on the prisoner. Then, she covered her hair with a scarf so it wouldn't get stained with blood and got ready for the task ahead. In front of her was the full set of torture tools, her work instruments, but Oscar didn't want to see any of it and hurriedly backed out, saying he didn't want to get in her way. After prepping some special scissors, Wanda approached the prisoner and almost whispered, asking him to sing the song she needed. The next moment, a muffled scream from Roger came from the hidden shed compartment, and it was not a pleasant sound for Oscar to hear. Stepping outside, RecapManhwa, he kept wondering if he'd done the right thing but hoped the injection would kick in. Nick and Anna waited for him by the shed and advised the boss to keep the mansion staff away from all this, but Mr. Parvalone assured them the doctor would fix things fast, though they thought the boss was wrong. However, Anna, he caught the guy's expression and started to realize he'd already done something with the prisoner. Right then, Wanda stormed out, mad and confused, not getting why things weren't going her way, yelling that Roger didn't even last 3 minutes. And she asked Oscar what Mr. Parvalone had given him, but instead he just said goodbye to Wanda and told her to say hi to her uncle. The doctor had no choice but to get ready to hit the road again, even though her anger hadn't cooled off. She promised she'd tell Johnny that Oscar was still a total mess. Meanwhile, the nanny watched from the window what was going down while Cody was drawing and throwing out new ideas for the masterpiece shortly after Vanessa noticed the doctor hadn't stayed long in that shed and was leaving the palace in a bad mood. But that wasn't the only thing that threw the nanny off, since she also saw several bloodstains on Wanda's apron. Vanessa wondered what bad stuff could have happened, but this time she decided not to get involved. Still, her curiosity got the best of her, and alone in her room at night, she decided to sneak a peek at the tablet. Even though she knew it could cause her trouble, Vanessa chose to check the cameras. The nanny started with the moment Mr. Parvalone's car returned to the property the day before. Then she spotted Adam and Nick in the black and white footage dragging something, and it wasn't light. Looking closer, Vanessa freaked out, realizing the body was wrapped in a blanket. It was late and the garden was pretty dark, so she couldn't make out what happened next, but the nanny knew the cameras were multispectral and figured that would definitely help her. Switching to infrared mode, Vanessa understood from the image that 2 men were dragging a man who was still alive. But then Vanessa got hit with the terrifying realization again that the guy was alive at that moment and now his fate was unknown. Then she remembered the doctor had left after lunch, and that night they could move the body again. Vanessa found the cam footage and saw that about 50 minutes ago, Adam and Nick were indeed carrying another big package, but this time the sensor showed only 2 heat signatures, meaning a tragic ending. The girl got horrified again, realizing her boss could be involved in this mess, and now it wasn't just her employer. Still, Vanessa knew perfectly well those 3 were hardcore criminals, and killing someone for them was like snapping a twig, and these thoughts now battled in her mind. While she tried to hold on to a better outcome, then she remembered that not long ago she'd given Mr. Parvalone info about his cousin, and after a while, they came back to the mansion with a living person, and later they carried a corpse. Now the girl clearly understood that those men had killed Roger, the guy she herself had brought them. The girl was now tormented by guilt and scared she'd helped commit a crime. The next day, Vanessa started thinking about breaking the contract and quitting this job, but didn't know how to face Barbara, who put all her hopes in her and cared about her a lot. Still, she couldn't stay in that house, so she grabbed her phone and dialed the Nanny Academy director's number. Right away, Barbara's voice came through, who from her students' hesitation knew bad stuff was going down. Then the director suggested sending another nanny to that mansion, but Vanessa said no. The girl asked what would happen if she broke the contract early, hoping they wouldn't send another nanny there. Barbara explained that if her agent didn't find a good reason, it'd be super hard to make a deal with the employer. The director totally got her students' struggles and wanted to help somehow. She also told Vanessa that if she wanted to go home, no agreement could stop her. The girl hoped to separate work and personal life, but it turned out way too hard and she got caught up. Barbara first thought the kid was in danger because of her, but Vanessa didn't want to say that. She didn't admit to the murder, but explained that in her opinion, her own actions made her job less safe. So the director suggested she talk directly to the employer herself and try to clear any obstacles for the job. Hearing this, Vanessa freaked out and started begging Barbara not to do anything like that. The director heard her and asked her to think it over and let her know her decision the next day. She was ready to accept any decision, adding that everyone at the academy missed Vanessa. After the talk, the nanny headed to the kitchen. Mrs. Kenneth was already giving Julia instructions, noticing Vanessa looking like a ghost. She told her to pull herself together and not get discouraged. Then Mrs. Kenneth explained it was all part of the birthday prep, since family from all over the world would be gathering. Vanessa offered to help, but Mrs. Kenneth just asked her to keep the kid away from all that. She also advised her to do something about the dark circles under her eyes, so no one thought they were working overtime here. A little later, Vanessa was with Cody, who was drawing a picture of Dad wearing a hat. She suggested adding a mustache too, then asked Cody what he was hoping for from the party. He said everyone would come, even Vincent and Lisa. The girl understood it wouldn't just be a party, but the house would be packed with criminals that day. She even remembered that tragic night when her home burned down because the situation was way too similar. Plus, doubts haunted her, since she hadn't found answers to her questions and just wanted out of that house. Later, she looked at the kid and felt even sadder, remembering she'd promised to protect him, but she thought her being there only made things worse, and because she cared about Cody, she could get caught up. Oscar could take advantage of that, and the girl figured the best move would be to quit this job. When Cody finished the portrait, the nanny suggested reading a book. Right then, Mrs. Kenneth came in saying it was time to get changed for dinner. The kid was hyped to hit the table, but Vanessa told him to shower first to be clean. Mrs. Kenneth pushed her out, saying she'd handle Cody while the girl got ready. Vanessa argued she had no fancy clothes, but the maid assured her everything was already laid out on her bed. When she went in, she saw the dress but had to make a big decision, and the party walk didn't feel like support. Then she grabbed the dress and checked it out, feeling it was super familiar. She remembered it was the same dress she wore that tragic day when her parents died, but then she pulled herself together, convincing herself it was just a dress. And the party was totally normal. She just had to tough it out for one night, and the next day she'd be free from all this. Downstairs, she saw Nick with some device over the gifts. He figured caution was never a mistake, even if it was just family, which was exactly why he was on alert. Nick explained that everyone had a reason to want Oscar dead. The nanny realized he was serious. Then she asked about Cody and learned he was with his cousins, so he wasn't her responsibility today. Other caretakers were with the kids, and she didn't get why she was even there. Nick said he was there as an undercover bodyguard, but his job was to have fun until dinner was served. During dinner, Vanessa was tasked with watching for anything suspicious, which she found hilarious in a house full of mobsters. Meanwhile, Don Johnny talked with his nephew and said the doctor was super disappointed since she got nothing. But Oscar reminded him she didn't need her services, and Johnny told him he was the one giving orders. The nephew just followed orders, grabbing Roger and waiting for the doctor to arrive without mentioning the prisoner's condition. Johnny sighed deeply because he demanded total obedience, but his nephew was trying to plot against him. Then the uncle made a more threatening comment, saying he might find a better way to motivate him. At that moment, they noticed a girl in a red dress appeared not far from them, stepping out for some fresh air. Johnny immediately started asking his nephew who this new employee was that he knew nothing about. Oscar called Vanessa over and decided to introduce her to his uncle Johnny. Parvalone, who had also come to the party, introduced Vanessa as his son's nanny, saying she was perfect for the job. The girl hesitated a bit since she didn't expect to run into the Mafia boss so soon, who's above everyone else, and had already figured out that every crime and horrible act found in the files led back to him. So Vanessa came to the conclusion that Johnny had to be the one who knew everything that went down that night years ago, but she just gave him a polite nod. And Johnny started asking where she trained, noticing that despite everything, she looked way too young to be a babysitter. The girl wanted to answer but caught Oscar's look telling her to lie. So she dodged the question with a sly smile, explaining that the whole point was that all the prep secrets stayed hush-hush. Johnny thought the girl was kinda challenging, but suspected there was some skill behind it, especially since the uncle knew how thorough Oscar was with his son's security. Then Johnny called the waiter, demanding another martini with 3 olives while eyeing the main boss. The girl couldn't get how he managed to smile after all that had gone down. She wanted to bounce ASAP because she couldn't stand it another second. And she left in a rush while still catching Johnny calling her a bold chick different from the rest. Vanessa couldn't stay there anymore despite the contract, the promise to the kid and all that. She planned to dip maybe even right now, but suddenly Nick appeared in front of her. And the girl kinda caught her breath cause she didn't want to see anyone at that moment. Nick told her dinner was already served, but the babysitter refused, saying she felt sick, though that didn't seem to bother him at all. And he insisted Vanessa had to attend dinner no matter how much she tried to dodge it. Next thing, Nick wasn't letting her go and reminded her it was the boss's order. Entering the building, Vanessa saw 3 kids, including Cody and some strangers, all watching the beautiful babysitter of their brother. The girl noticed Cody trying to act like a good host and confirmed it by showing her the best spots. Vanessa saw the kid looked super mature and crazy confident at that moment. Then she remembered her own childhood when she felt just as sure of herself. After that, Cody told the babysitter the kids would eat at a table she wasn't allowed to join. The babysitter blushed a bit but suddenly heard Oscar's voice offering to escort her there. She protested since it was her birthday, but that was exactly why the boss decided who she'd dine with. Then Oscar grabbed her arm and dragged her, something she didn't get, and that happened right in front of other guests. Later he confessed she had dazzled his uncle. But since Vanessa didn't ask, he chose not to mention her past to Mr. Parvalone. She hated being underestimated, so he invited her to the table and pointed out her seat. Despite everything, the young woman was surprised the boss had invited her to the party, and in response he leaned in and whispered that now she was part of his family. At that moment, Vanessa noticed again how the boss could say every line like it was a threat. Then she looked at the guests, each more famous than the last. Even a well-known butcher was there. Then she spotted another lady she'd read about and realized any one of them could be tied to her parents' death. A young guy came over to talk, introduced himself as Kale, and she knew he was famous for being a player, but she just gave a polite intro and he said it was his first time seeing her there. Then Kale guessed she worked for the birthday guy, and she confirmed it. The dude also noticed she was tense and told her to chill, saying no one cared, then added with a wicked squint that no one but Mr. Parvalone gave a damn about Vanessa. She glanced at Oscar and saw he wasn't taking his eyes off her either. Kyle added he couldn't guess the boss's mood, whether he was interested, pissed, or both. He also admitted he and Oscar were third cousins since they shared the same great-grandma. Kyle felt bad Roger's brother couldn't make it to the party, but Vanessa made it clear that wasn't her problem. Kyle felt bad that Roger's brother couldn't make it to the party, but Vanessa made it clear it wasn't her problem. She was just doing her job. Despite all that, the girl felt awful. Being surrounded by so many people was unbearable. Then she fixed her gaze back on Mr. Parvalone and didn't get why he kept staring at her. She also guessed Oscar was suspicious. Thinking she might be up to something shady, then they served the last dish and Kyle asked the girl to join them in the library, where they'd have dessert, but Vanessa declined and the guy finally said he enjoyed meeting her. He also added that many of them would be moving north soon, and maybe they'd see each other more often. The girl said that news sounded amazing and hurried out of the room, running into Mrs. Kenneth in the hallway, who asked her to take Cody to his room since he was tired, exactly what she needed. Without hesitation, she picked him up and headed to his room. Cody hadn't tried the cupcake yet, but the nanny assured him he could have that dessert for breakfast. The girl knew it was probably their last morning together. After wishing the little guy good night, she left his room and her thoughts started racing again. Closing the door behind her, Vanessa leaned against it with her hands and whispered goodbye to that little troublemaker. Right after she heard the boss's voice behind her, knowing it would be him, she quickly turned around. But at that moment, she didn't know what to say to Mr. Parvalone. He added that she'd been restless all night, something not only he noticed but the others too. Though he didn't know why, he advised the nanny to sort it out, since they couldn't show any weakness, but the girl interrupted, saying there was no such thing as weakness. Then she admitted she was annoyed that she'd lied to Oscar. He wanted to know exactly what she lied about, and the girl took it as meaning she'd lied multiple times. Mr. Parvalone just repeated his question in a threatening tone about what she lied about. Then Vanessa blew up, saying she knew what Oscar did with his cousin. She covered her mouth in horror for saying too much. Though she'd already decided to quit anyway, Oscar didn't even deny it except for his first sentence, and assured her he never actually lied. The girl got mad that her boss didn't even try to help Roger. Even though he said Roger was in danger, Oscar never said he'd help him, so his words weren't lies. The girl started saying he used her even though she didn't want to get involved in his business. He tricked her into helping. But Oscar had no other choice. He also accused the nanny of lying when she got access to the network. She swore she'd only checked the necessary files but didn't understand why it mattered. Mr. Parvalone explained that when she started investigating, she probably thought no one would notice. Vanessa thought Oscar had warned about her moves, but it wasn't him. He also admitted they were being watched. The man revealed his uncle trusted no one, and everything he does gets transmitted to Albuquerque's central computer. That's when Vanessa realized the reflection program was watching not her but her boss. Oscar added that her actions made the uncle find out, and gave him a mission reminding him of the consequences for traitors. Now Vanessa got it. Oscar didn't kill his cousin on his own will. She admitted she was responsible for everything and that her boss got punished. While she just kept blaming him, Oscar tried to calm her down but gave her a choice: either he'd hide the info or she'd help him fully. Now Vanessa faced an even tougher, scarier decision and didn't know how to respond. Vanessa didn't get why she had to decide, but she was the one who investigated Oscar's family and accessed the system. So she apologized to her boss, explaining it was just curiosity, and she never imagined someone would die because of it. The girl was so shaken by this she couldn't hold it and broke down crying, since someone had suffered because of her. However, Mr. Parvalone added that sooner or later someone would have gone after Roger anyway. Then he said his cousin was lucky because thanks to Oscar he passed to the other side pain-free. Now seeing the nanny cry, he even felt guilty for dragging her into all this, but she still believed it was her fault. Oscar praised her unmatched hacker skills. That's exactly why he asked her to find his cousin. He knew any delay could have ended differently and his uncle might have doubted his loyalty. What she didn't get was why Oscar hadn't fired her right after she helped him save his rep. Everyone had their secrets, and even though the boss wasn't lying, that didn't mean he was spilling everything. Still, he trusted her to protect Cody. RecapManhwa. Then Mr. Parvalone stepped closer, grabbed her hands and begged her to stay. He admitted he knew she wanted out of this place, that all of this was too much for her, but he hoped she'd stick around. Oscar insisted that both the kid and himself needed Vanessa, even though it seemed like Cody was sure she didn't get why her boss was so confident he could convince her, while she felt her own judgment shifting, but she immediately shut down Mr. Parvalone, saying she needed time to think, and quickly walked away from him. Oscar didn't chase her and stayed in the hallway, waiting for the girl to make the right call. She, on the other hand, locked herself in her room trying to clear her head. Vanessa felt this void in her mind every time Oscar looked at her like that. She knew he was using her worry for Cody against her. By then, she'd seen many sides of him. She remembered how he got mad, how he was careful with her when he saw her asleep on the floor, and how he gently woke her up. She also recalled the pool day when everyone had fun together, but she never forgot every time Parvalone whispered threats in her ear. She couldn't decide which of those personalities was the real one. And she wondered what would happen if they were all mixed together. She also remembered that chat in the garden when Oscar was about to reveal his plan with Cody. She clearly recalled how furious he looked, explaining that his dad couldn't trust anyone after losing his wife. Parvalone's worry that his uncle doubted his loyalty also weighed on Vanessa. She felt Oscar wasn't fully in control, and that he hadn't chosen her for the reason he claimed. She understood she didn't deserve his full trust, and that she saw the boss only as a bad example, but it turned out different. Again, she noticed she'd broken her rule of not feeling anything for anyone. She didn't get how to avoid it because all that brought up painful memories. At that moment, she could swear she clearly smelled smoke, but then she realized and understood the harsh truth. The smoke was real and there was probably a fire in the house. Vanessa decided to check right away if little Cody was hurt, but behind the door the fire was already roaring. Now nothing was stopping her. She decided to save the kid, wondering if Oscar could save himself too. The flames spread fast and almost burned her, blocking every possible path. But she didn't give up, covering her nose with her hand to breathe less smoke, and lunged to complete her mission. Soon she was in the kid's room where he sat terrified, but the fire hadn't reached yet. The nanny wrapped Cody in a blanket, explaining there was a fire in the house and they had to get out fast. Cody wanted to grab his rubber duck that had fallen in the corner of the bed, but there was no time to lose. With the kid in her arms, Vanessa ran back down the hall trying to reach the exit as fast as possible. But the way was blocked by a small collapse of burnt boards that had fallen, sealing the path. Vanessa realized she couldn't get out the stairs anymore and had to find another way. In the distance, she saw the driver trying through the smoke to spot her and little Cody. The girl yelled that the kid was with her and that they'd try to get out through the window. Passing again by Oscar's room packed with fire, the nanny hoped he wasn't inside when the fire started. Soon, they reached a spot where there were no flames yet, but the whole room was filled with smoke. She sat the kid beside her, who kept worrying about his dad while understanding they were trapped. Then the nanny started pushing the balcony door, which for some weird reason was stuck and she had to push hard. With a strong shove, she managed to open it, and the next second she was already on the balcony, quickly looking for the best way down. Then Vanessa went back for the kid, who begged her to find his dad. But she trusted Oscar had already gotten out. She explained to the kid that the stairs were blocked and they'd have to climb down using the ivy on the wall. Cody, though super bummed, got that his babysitter was right and rolled with her call, carrying the kid on his back. Vanessa told him to hold tight and got ready to drop. Next thing, she was straight up jumping over the railing. Feeling around with her bare feet for the best spot to land, the ivy thorns dug into her hands, legs, and face. But she didn't quit. Then some not-so-thick branches started cracking and Vanessa knew the plant couldn't hold both of them. Turning her head back, she spotted some bushes right below and figured that was their shot. Placing the kid in front, the girl braced herself for the jump. Next moment, they both sliced through the air while the babysitter avoided turning to not hurt Cody. The landing was rougher than she thought. Vanessa thought, but hey, better than hitting the ground hard. Then the bush branches tensed a bit and she rolled with the kid over the grass. Covering his head while still on the ground, she was hyped. She managed to save Cody. Cody was already trying to break free from her hug, still thinking about his dad and desperate to find him ASAP to make sure he was okay. But all he saw around was fire and wreckage, and soon he started asking the babysitter where his dad was and why he wasn't anywhere in sight. Soon they spotted a group who made it out of the burning building. But Mr. Parvalone was still MIA. Then Adam, the driver, showed up, hyped that the kid and babysitter had managed to escape. Vanessa asked if he'd seen Oscar and the driver. Guessed the boss might have slipped out through the back hallway. Plus Vanessa couldn't get why the alarm hadn't gone off. But Adam was sure it was all planned on purpose. Vanessa flashed back to that awful day from her childhood, when the alarm didn't work either. For a sec it felt like history repeating itself, and now she was sure the same dude was behind both messes. Then Cody spotted his dad's room window almost completely burned down, and got even more worried about his dad. Adam kept insisting the boss wasn't there but was in the library when Julia raised the alarm. Vanessa didn't get why the servants mattered, and the driver went on explaining the maid was bringing plates to the kitchen. That's when she noticed the smoke. The flames spread fast and she tried to figure out what could have caused it. Meanwhile, Cody kept crying and the babysitter suspected Oscar was with Nico and Anna since they were nowhere to be seen either. She told the kid to trust them since everyone was doing their job as well as she was doing hers. Right then, Mrs. Kenneth showed up, checking the list to make sure everyone got out of the house. She was sure Oscar and his uncle plus Nick and Anna had made it out the back door. Then she overheard people wondering who could have been the target that sparked this fire. It was obvious it was a family's house. But the Don was here too, and reaching him wouldn't be easy. The young woman talking about it suggested the arsonist could be any one of them. Soon an ambulance siren blared and the driver took charge of opening the doors. Just minutes later, firefighters were on the scene, powerful water jets soaking the building. Then, Kyle showed up with Vanessa, bummed that such a beautiful house was burning without thinking about the people trapped inside. But Kyle started flexing about dropping mad cash on a gift that now Oscar couldn't even open. He also said the boss was 2 years younger than him and that his gray hair was deceptive. But Cody was sure his dad was blonde and Kyle just smirked, hinting Oscar wasn't totally honest. The kid got mad and was about to yell at that show-off when he heard his dad calling him. Forgetting everything else, the kid couldn't believe he was hearing his dad's voice again and that he was still alive. The man was with his men and uncle now heading toward the group. Cody dropped the blanket and bolted toward his dad at full speed, almost jumping. Next moment, Mr. Parvalone was already hugging his son tight and was just as relieved the kid was okay. Then Vanessa stepped closer. But he started yelling at her for not answering his calls, and the girl didn't get why he was so damn mad. Well, her phone was left inside and she didn't have time to think about it. Then Kyle showed up like a shadow, who told the heroic story of Vanessa jumping from the second floor, with the kid realizing he'd been wrong all along. Mr. Parvalone calmed down right away and agreed the girl needed to rest. Then Vanessa cleared up that next time she'd call emergency services first instead of acting on impulse. Oscar didn't fully get what she meant by next time, but decided not to ask for now. After tonight, she convinced herself she couldn't stay indifferent watching the two who at that moment looked super innocent and helpless, and she knew they needed her help now. No way she was leaving. So she corrected herself, explaining that next time she'd just do her best to improve. Then Anna came over, wanting to stitch up the boss's head wound, who didn't remember how he escaped the ruined garage. Anna figured it was because he was still in blind panic. And he asked her to remind him why he kept her around with Nick the kid, who was also nearby. Joked that it was to help him get out of burning buildings. Well, Kyle noticed Oscar didn't really trust the nanny with his son's safety, but she assured him she acted like any parent would. The kid also offered her to join his crew if she wanted to feel truly valuable. The girl thought he had kids too, but nope, he had other interests. Kyle explained that for a lady who jumps out windows, there'd always be work. Then he walked off, and Nick, who saw the truth in his words, came up to Vanessa. Meanwhile, he noticed that even if the nanny agreed to join Kyle, she couldn't just bounce from here. Vanessa said that wasn't necessary, but Nick caught her hesitation for some reason and told her to leave ASAP if she kept doubting for whatever reason. But Vanessa knew it was way too late to back out, especially since she couldn't leave Cody with his dad. With full conviction, she repeated she'd stay and had zero plans to ditch that family. Mrs. Kenneth heard that and decided everyone would have to suit up and hunt for whatever stuff survived. Then she asked if anyone had objections, but no one dared challenge her call. Vanessa ripped a thin strip off her dress right away. Getting ready for the task ahead, she used that strip to tie her hair back in a ponytail so it wouldn't get in the way during the mission. Going back into the burned building, the girl knew almost nothing probably survived. Entering the kid's room, she spotted a burnt rubber ducky Cody loved so much, found nothing else there, and headed to check his bedroom, hoping some stuff survived. The first thing she noticed was the briefcase that made it through, something she now thanked the academy for. Opening it, she saw the laptop looked intact and probably worked through no time to test it now. But now she only had one uniform left from the set, so she figured she'd need to order more. Inspecting once more, Vanessa thought she'd grabbed all the essentials and got ready to head back, but still decided to double-check and also check Parvalone's room. Following the wall, the floorboards were badly charred, making a huge hole now, but that didn't stop Vanessa, and soon she was on the other side, ready to keep going. Ahead, she saw a medium-sized metal chest that didn't seem damaged by the fire. She even found it weird that in a house full of modern tech there'd be something so old-school. But she was curious what documents a crime organization might keep in such a safe. Whatever it was well protected. So Vanessa immediately tried to crack the code. First, she tried combos based on Oscar's or Cody's birth dates. Those digits didn't open the chest, so Vanessa tried the birth date of Parvalone's wife. But that combo didn't work either, and Vanessa felt a bit awkward. Just then Anna came in, wondering what the nanny was doing there. She quickly made an excuse, saying she was checking if the box. The strong guy was fine and totally unharmed, but the young woman couldn't move him, and Anna said she'd handle it herself and even knew the code. The boss just asked her to grab some stuff. Vanessa decided not to get in her way and headed downstairs to help once Anna left. She noticed something weird but also kind of familiar about the nanny on the street. Mr. Parvalone asked Mrs. Kenneth what they'd lost, and she said almost everything. Then Vanessa showed up. Holding a burnt little duck, she mentioned they'd lost someone else too. Cody, seeing his favorite toy, ran straight to it, hyped to have it back in his hands. Then a heavy guilt hit him for leaving it in their burning house. Vanessa felt bad too, but her priority was saving him first. Cody got that, but he didn't get why other people were suffering around him because of him. Then his dad came over and promised they'd hold a religious service and get him a new toy. Soon after, Nick and Anna showed up and reported they'd taken out everything possible from the house. Nick also said rebuilding the security system was a no-go, and they couldn't see what happened the night before. Anna added they'd destroyed all the hard drives and electronics, even the damaged stuff. Vanessa realized they'd wiped all the proof of illegal activity, but the most important stuff was still in the safe. Then the driver came in and told the boss he'd set up all the guests at the hotel for the night. Uncle Johnny decided to head straight home. Nick asked what would happen to them, and Oscar said he'd rented several rooms long-term at the big hotel. RecapManhwa. Adam immediately noticed they had a rooftop pool there, and from Cody's room window he could see his favorite park. Vanessa, who'd been listening to the whole convo, was interested in spending time at the hotel, but worried they might have to go to Albuquerque. Oscar assured her it'd take more than a fire for that to happen. Plus, Mr. Parvalone admitted things had gone too far to turn back now. Meanwhile, Johnny was heading home when the driver told him about an incoming call. It was Simon who first asked politely how the event went. Dawn smirked evilly and then added with some irony that everything went off with a spark. Johnny asked if Simon had found the employee Oscar hired to hack his network, warning it had to be a new hire. The guy thought Nick and Anna weren't cut out for that since they couldn't even open a suitcase lock. The only employee they hadn't checked was the nanny who started working there about a month ago. Dawn found that pretty interesting, and Simon kept digging on her while those mafiosos did their job. Oscar's family had already arrived at the Grand Central Hotel. They looked more like a bunch of lost souls than a serious mafia crew. But the concierge knew Mr. Parvalone's face well and immediately started greeting him, offering all kinds of services. Nick came up right away and explained their boss had a rough night, so he'd talk tomorrow. Then Anna showed up, planning to discuss the hotel's lodging conditions with the concierge. Meanwhile, Vanessa was checking out the lobby, which looked pretty clean and spotless. Suddenly, Adam's voice came from behind her. He was admiring the luxury too and said they'd be staying there for a while. The convo got cut off by Mrs. Kenneth, who handed them their room key cards. She told Julia to take care of their rooms and handle the laundry since she didn't trust the local staff. Adam's duties didn't change. He had to try to find a comfy spot in the parking lot. Admitted things had gone too far to turn back. Meanwhile, Johnny was heading home when the driver told him about an incoming call. It was Simon who first politely asked how the event went. Dawn smirked wickedly, then added with some irony that everything went off with a spark. Then Johnny asked if Simon had found the employee Oscar hired to hack his network. Warning it had to be a new hire, the guy figured Nick and Anna weren't cut out for that, since they couldn't even open a suitcase lock. The only employee they hadn't checked was the babysitter who started working there about a month ago. Dawn found that pretty interesting, and Simon kept digging into her while those mafiosos did their thing. Oscar's family had already arrived at the Grand Central Hotel. They looked more like a pack of lost souls than a serious mafia crew. But the concierge knew Mr. Parvalone's face well and immediately started greeting him, offering all kinds of services. Nick came over right away, explaining his boss had a rough night, so he'd talk tomorrow. Then Anna arrived, planning to discuss with the concierge the lodging conditions at this hotel. Meanwhile, Vanessa was checking out the lobby, which looked pretty clean and spotless. Suddenly, she heard Adam's voice behind her, who was also admiring the luxury and mentioned they'd be staying there for a while. Their chat got cut off by Mrs. Kenneth handing them the room key cards. She tasked Julia with taking care of their rooms and handling the laundry, since she didn't trust the local staff or Adam. His duties didn't change, and he had to try to score a comfy spot in the parking lot. No problem, but first he wanted to rest. Meanwhile, Mrs. Kenneth took Vanessa's card, explaining the babysitter wouldn't live separately, but would share the apartment with Cody. The girl couldn't believe what she was hearing. Because she'd never dreamed of living in an apartment, Vanessa didn't even know how to handle life in a hotel, since she'd never been in one and thought there might be security issues in the elevator. She calmed down, remembering she'd be close to Cody since he'd been through a lot. It wasn't even about losing stuff or the house. It was just that the kid's security, which was also taken from his mom, was all he had left, hoping Cody wasn't asleep yet. The babysitter knocked on the door, but Mr. Parvalone opened it, and she almost thought she'd grabbed the wrong room. But then she heard Cody's voice. He'd already picked a room and told his dad to choose another one. Oscar invited Vanessa in, knowing she was wiped out and didn't want to bother her now. The girl walked over to the window and checked out the night cityscape. It looked straight up amazing. She remembered Mrs. Kenneth's words about sharing a room with a guy and realized she'd twisted the situation on purpose. But now she didn't care much, since she was already picturing how huge the rooms would be later. Vanessa stepped into a small hallway and saw there were only 3 rooms on that floor. For her, Cody, and Oscar, that made her a bit uncomfortable, so she suggested to Mr. Parvalone maybe she could take another room. But he wanted her close to his son and wasn't about to take no for an answer. Still, he got that they'd have to share the same bathroom, which embarrassed her even more, but Oscar just smiled and told her to feel at home, like they'd be there a while. Not long after, Vanessa was tucking the kid into bed, and he wondered how long they'd be staying, but the babysitter didn't know. Then Cody asked about the fire alarm, and Vanessa assured him everything was good. She could even turn on the curtains to prove it and convince him all was chill. She leaned over the lying Cody and promised she wouldn't hesitate to light a match near those curtains for him. The kid thanked the babysitter for looking out, and she decided to let him sleep, wishing him good night as she left the room. Suddenly, Vanessa realized she'd been so busy she hadn't even showered yet. While getting ready for the shower, she hoped the water noise wouldn't wake anyone, thinking everyone else was already out cold. Under the hot stream, she stayed a bit until she was sure the smoke smell had totally disappeared. Putting on a soft kimono and brushing her hair, Vanessa realized she could get used to this level of comfort real quick. Even though she knew it was only temporary, she still liked the setup she was in now. Just then, Mr. Parvalone showed up. Vanessa thought he should have been asleep, but she noticed no one had tended to his bruises. She called him out when she saw the first aid kit in his hands and admitted she'd already treated her own wounds. But Oscar insisted on patching her up. It was the least he could do for her now. Amid the chaos, Mr. Parvalone didn't forget who'd pulled his son out of the burning house and apologized to the babysitter for being so harsh with her. The girl said it was her duty, just like Oscar's, but she was also sad. Realizing she wouldn't be able to reach her son, she remembered their talk right before the fire and wasn't sure how to act. If she decided to leave immediately, Vanessa assured her she'd never leave Cody alone there, no matter what. Then she confessed that once someone had pulled her out of a burning house, Vanessa admired that woman so much she decided she definitely wanted to be like her. And now everything the girl does for Cody is thanks to that very woman. When Mr. Parvalone finished bandaging her leg, Vanessa thanked him for all the care. Then Oscar was about to rest but remembered he wanted to tell the babysitter something else. He pulled a small keychain from his pocket and handed it to her. She didn't get what the key was for, so Oscar explained it was the key to his room and she could lock it just in case. He also admitted he felt better on that floor with her than with Nick, who carried knives everywhere, even to the bathroom. Then Mr. Parvalone left her alone, wishing her a good night, and she tried to figure out what she'd gotten herself into. Back in the room, she felt tired but knew she had to do more for Cody's safety, so she decided to start by checking the inn's camera footage and spotting vulnerable spots with a clear view. Vanessa noticed that cameras covered almost every spot, and there was a janitor at every entrance. The hardest part now was keeping the guests in check, since it was trickier than just checking the staff. Plus, Vanessa decided Cody shouldn't go out alone without her so nothing bad would happen. Then she remembered something else and wrote a letter to Barbara saying she'd stay and asked them to send a uniform outfit to the inn. The next day, Vanessa tried to get Cody out of the room so he wouldn't miss breakfast. But he felt embarrassed to go out like that, so the girl promised they'd go shopping as soon as they finished, and Oscar showed up, who thought his son still wasn't ready, so the boy came out begging his dad to convince the nanny that he couldn't show up in front of people like that. Then Nick, who usually teased the kid, couldn't resist and called him a charming little pup, while Oscar noticed the hotel pajamas definitely wouldn't cut it. Cody got bummed out, since his dad had a suit and he didn't get why he hadn't grabbed one for him, but his dad reminded him that he'd grown up anyway. The kid agreed it was better to wear this than nothing at all, and the nanny promised they'd place an urgent order with the tailor. Now all Cody had to do was put them on. Some super cute boots that he didn't like at all. While the kid was putting them on, Oscar, Nick, and Anna were discussing the need to open new businesses. Nick, however, suggested focusing on what had happened recently, but Mr. Parvalone thought Anna would handle it perfectly. Meanwhile, the nanny chatted with Cody, promising they'd hit up any store he wanted right after lunch. A few hours later, they were back with several bags, and Cody was happy with his haul. The kid immediately told his dad he now had a bunch of new handkerchiefs and some awesome suits. Oscar thought they came back quick, but his son convinced the sellers it was better to deal with him. Then Vanessa showed up and honestly admitted they'd spent twice as much as planned. The kid, happy to look presentable now, ordered that he wanted to go back to the drawing class, but Mr. Parvalone opposed it, thinking it was too dangerous, and asked his son not to bring it up again. So the nanny suggested signing him up for any other drawing class, but he wanted to see Clark. Oscar didn't know who Clark was, and Vanessa explained he was another kid from the class. Cody also thought his friend needed guidance and couldn't let him handle this world alone. The nanny suggested they could invite that kid over and that she'd find the contacts through school. Then she reminded him they could organize another pool day, and Cody loved the idea but now also needed some new swimsuits. Mr. Parvalone asked his son who his friend's parents were, and he said they worked as dentists. Oscar thought for a moment longer, then agreed to have his son's friend over with his nanny but reminded Vanessa to keep an eye on them. The next day, Cody and his nanny were already at the entrance, waiting for Clark. He arrived with his nanny at the agreed time, and the boys were super happy to see each other. Clark's nanny, named Allison, admitted she'd missed her charge a lot even after what happened in class. And Clark approached Cody empty-handed and gave him a new little rubber duck since he'd heard his house had burned down. That seemed super sweet to the Mafia kid since the hotel hadn't shown any interest in hooking him up with those bath ducks. Vanessa suggested the boys change in her room, and then they could head up to the penthouse rooftop pool. Soon, Cody was showing his friend the way, and he admired everything, not just him, but also his nanny, who'd never been in a penthouse before. When Vanessa was about to settle in, RecapManhwa, she suddenly heard a familiar voice calling her. Turning around, she saw Nick sunbathing and immediately asked what he was doing there. He gave her a chance to guess and then added that today was pool day and he didn't want to miss out. Then, Nick confessed the boss was working with Anna today and his skills hadn't been needed. Vanessa noticed his skills really didn't show any polish, but Nick didn't find that funny. He also added that everyone would scare him, so he let Anna handle gathering intel. The girl first thought he meant the fire. What happened at the Parvalone house, but Nick didn't rush to answer and just calmly sipped his cold drink. However, the babysitter didn't look away, so he hinted that she had already guessed right. Plus, Nick figured someone close to him, more precisely from his family, might be involved, but after a few seconds, the young man also added that even someone from the staff could be involved. Upon hearing that the arsonist might be part of the staff, the babysitter got lost in thought again about what had happened to her own family. Now Vanessa was more convinced that the same Parvalone person was behind both incidents. At that moment, the girl realized she was one step closer to the truth, but at the same time, sad memories flooded her again. Her thoughts were interrupted when Allison asked for permission to take her room key. Clark's babysitter explained there was a line for the bathroom and she needed to go, so Vanessa agreed. Then the kids called her to join their fun game and she decided not to say no. Allison approached Vanessa's backpack, grabbed the key, and looked around like she was about to steal something. Nick found her behavior a little weird, even though he'd heard Vanessa let her take the key. Meanwhile, the girl kept having fun in the pool with the kids playing different games. Cody suggested Vanessa be the shark, but she'd already done that and proposed Allison try it. The babysitter looked around and noticed Allison had been gone quite a while, which alerted Vanessa. She decided to check it out and asked the kids to keep playing while then asking Nick to watch the kids, and also begged them to give the room key back to Vanessa. She got a weird gut feeling and Nick also sensed something was off. So the guy called Mrs. Kenneth to come up to the rooftop and cover for him. He suggested Vanessa leave, and he'd join once Mrs. Kenneth arrived. He gave her his key and the babysitter dashed upstairs to find out what Allison was planning, hoping she was wrong, slowly opening the room door. The girl peeked through the narrow crack to see what was going on inside. At first she didn't see Allison anywhere, and figured she was in one of the rooms, probably Cody's. From there, she decided to pull the key from her hiding spot and opened the door. Throwing it wide open, Vanessa announced the bathroom wasn't in that room. Allison got scared when caught, and started making excuses saying she'd just gotten lost, but the babysitter didn't listen, and simply pushed her aside immediately, then locked the door so she couldn't escape, which freaked out Clark's babysitter. After that, Vanessa asked why she really came and then took Allison's bag. Allison got even more scared, realizing now the room's owner could expose her. As Vanessa emptied the bag's contents, she saw several items, including pliers and a screwdriver. She also found a homemade listening device that Allison hadn't installed yet. The Mafia babysitter started interrogating the captive about how many more mics she'd set up, but Allison denied it. So Vanessa decided to use her skills. And with her trained eyes, she scanned the whole room instantly. The first thing she noticed was the alarm clock wasn't in its place but slightly moved. She also saw an extra blinking light on the smoke detector that shouldn't have been there. Inspecting the walls, Vanessa noticed a fake outlet that was another listening device. Putting all the gadgets together, the girl couldn't understand what kind of monster would plant mics in a kid's room. Then she heard a knock on the door and immediately heard Nick, who opened it in a hurry. Seeing the mics, the guy decided to take the captive to Oscar's room before she did anything else. Allison swore she knew nothing, but Nick didn't buy it and suspected the Clark kid was involved too. The babysitter instantly shouted not to touch him since she had to keep an eye on him at all times while Nick took her away. Allison kept insisting those things weren't hers and she didn't know anything about them. Vanessa returned to the pool and gave ice cream to the kids without hinting that anything had happened in the room, and they were so hyped by the surprise that they didn't even ask where Allison had been or what Vanessa was doing. Mrs. Kenneth approached the nanny and asked if everything was cool, to which she replied that Nick would handle everything later. Back in the room, Clark asked Cody if he could visit again. Cody was chill with it, and then they ran into Mr. Parvalone, who smiled knowing his son had a good day. Meanwhile, Nick confessed to the nanny that Allison had admitted everything, though she didn't know who they were or why they'd asked her to plant bugs. When Vanessa asked Nick who ordered the task, he found out it was Clark's mom. Then Oscar's driver came over and told him they had some important visitors, and Cody's dad realized it was his friend's mom. Clark didn't get why she was there, but she'd come to fix a mistake. Mr. Parvalone recognized the woman immediately and never imagined Clark was his son. Vanessa asked Nick who Mrs. Colt was and found out she was the leader of the French Mafia. Oscar couldn't believe his son had introduced Clark's parents as dentists, but Mrs. Colt explained her husband was one. Nick whispered to the nanny that this explained how the Mafia had taken over the prescription drug market. Mr. Parvalone, though happy to welcome Mrs. Colt, still had one question left. This question was about her behavior toward the Parvalone family and pointed at Allison. Related to the matter, Oscar wasn't demanding an apology, but hinted she'd have to pay up another way. He also made it clear he could treat Allison however he wanted if she didn't fix her mess. The lady argued there were plenty of nannies everywhere, so she didn't see value in that employee and told him to keep her, while Allison, terrified, begged with her eyes. Oscar declared they weren't in the bargaining market, though he admitted Mrs. Colt had been caught off guard and didn't even realize it until they destroyed her bug. Mrs. Colt claimed the Parvalone family had invited her son, and she just took advantage of the situation. Then she threatened Oscar, saying this was her city and if he forgot, the fire would be his least problem. The lady grabbed her son's hand and dragged him home, barely having time to say goodbye to his friend. Staying with his son, Oscar grilled him about what he'd learned, and Cody confessed he didn't like Clark anymore. Mr. Parvalone was glad his son had caught on and sent him to change for dinner. The Allison situation still needed sorting. Nick suggested tossing her in the ocean while Adam would double-check the number. Then he turned to Vanessa and called her out for not protecting Cody and introducing him to other mafiosos. The young woman was speechless, since she had no clue who the boy's real mom was. However, she admitted she should have checked Clark's family before inviting him, but then Mr. Parvalone smiled and confessed he was just messing with her, which surprised her a bit. He also pointed out that Vanessa had cleverly caught Allison, who clearly wasn't a match for his son's nanny, determined to keep it that way. The girl asked permission to go prep dinner, but Oscar planned to tag along. After a while, an employee greeted them at the restaurant and kindly led them to a table. Mr. Parvalone checked the menu to see what he might like and was soon ready to order. Vanessa and Cody also opened their menus, and the kid grabbed the same one the adults were checking. Then a waiter came over and offered him a special kids menu, but Cody declined because he wanted a fish fillet. The waiter explained they only served adult portions, but he insisted on ordering that dish. The nanny noticed Cody had ordered the fish fillet yesterday and the day before but never finished it, so she suggested pasta instead. Just then, Oscar jumped in and ordered the fillet plus baked potatoes with spices. Vanessa also ordered chicken meatballs and pasta, and although Cody didn't want pasta, the nanny clarified it was for her. Later, the kid started doodling on a napkin, and Vanessa realized what happened that day didn't bother him much. She thought it was harmless for kids to play together, but understood anyone in the city could be an enemy. Plus, he suspected that if he tried to separate Cody from his dad's world, it could put him at even more risk. Looking at Oscar, Vanessa noticed he wasn't worried, but she never really understood what the man was thinking at that moment. Parvalone decided to bring up the fire, and the girl was surprised he still remembered it. Then he went on to say that, according to him, Vanessa had been pulled out of a burning house and asked when it happened. The girl understood which fire he meant, but thought her boss had forgotten about it. Then the nanny realized that Oscar was just waiting for that moment, knowing he couldn't avoid the conversation in front of the kid. Cody hadn't been told that his house burned down too, and he was really curious about how it happened, so Vanessa started by saying that back then. She was a few years older than him when the accident happened at her house. Suddenly a fire broke out. She was super scared and didn't know what to do. But Vanessa was lucky to have a nanny who saved her from certain death, and Cody listened to her story with mad empathy. Since she had saved him too when the fire started, then the kid got curious if her nanny had lost all her stuff since he couldn't forget the burned duck toy, and Vanessa admitted she didn't just lose all her things in the fire. She lost absolutely everything, but then she added with a kind smile that she didn't get discouraged just like Cody and his dad. She also assured the kid she wouldn't blink and that their new house would be ready soon, and then Cody demanded that the new house have a room just for painting, but his dad clarified it would be an exact copy of the old one. So the kid suggested that since the library had burned down, they could use that room instead. Oscar was still a bit against it, but the nanny convinced the kid that he also needed books. Cody agreed to leave some art books in a corner, but also wanted a pool with ducks in the backyard, and Oscar promised to pass the kid's wishes onto the architects while the nanny tried to guess what else he'd want to ask the boss. She knew perfectly well she couldn't lie to kids because they were her weakness, but Mr. Parvalone stayed silent and the nanny realized again it wasn't worth expecting him to be honest. After lunch, everyone left the restaurant and the staff kept showering them with compliments. Back in bed, Cody was still restless, worried the gift from Clark might have spy bugs, but Vanessa carefully checked the duck toy. Then the kid calmly placed his toy on the pillow so he wouldn't have to sleep alone. The girl waited until the kid wrapped in a blanket started falling asleep, then decided to leave, but then Cody asked if Clark was really his friend or if he shouldn't hang out with a guy like him. That question caught the nanny off guard, but she answered that it all depended on the two of them, even if their parents didn't get along. That shouldn't affect their friendship, but Cody believed family should be the most important thing, and Vanessa nodded. Family can come first, but that doesn't stop you from enjoying other things in life. However, Cody fell asleep, and as she left his room, the nanny thought maybe things weren't as bad as she thought. Then she walked toward the kitchen area where Mr. Parvalone was making himself a drink, adding ice. Vanessa didn't approach without a reason. She wanted to talk to him about something important. Oscar thought she meant what he said at dinner, but the young woman decided to talk about his son, so he gave the nanny his full attention. And she remembered that night in the garden when he mentioned his goal. She was still intrigued about what exact goal Mr. Parvalone had for his son. She didn't want to speculate and asked the man in charge to honestly tell her what he had planned for Cody. Oscar had many plans actually, but regarding his son, he preferred to call them dreams. Then he looked at her thoughtfully and added that actually that dream was more like a hope. He set the glass down on the table and decided to confess to the nanny what his dream was, but only to her. Mr. Parvalone sincerely wished his son to be free, but the young woman didn't fully understand what he meant by that, so he whispered in her ear that he didn't want the kid to have a life like his, nor did he want his son to be a role model. Oscar wanted Cody to have an authentic life, and that when he grew up, he'd have the chance to choose, and Vanessa immediately thought he meant the same kind of choices he himself makes. But Oscar kept insisting that if he let his son choose now, no cap, he'd definitely follow him. At the same time, he wanted his son close to protect him but also keep him away so he could be free. Vanessa realized that Mr. Parvalone wouldn't be able to do it himself, but that's exactly why he needed her. He couldn't pull it off alone. But he was sure the nanny would help isolate the kid from bad influences. Thinking for a sec, Vanessa figured she also had to protect Cody from his own dad. Oscar agreed if it helped everyone and asked the nanny again to help find Cody another path. She felt like her boss even seemed sick he'd never openly gone against the Mafia before. But now he was choosing his words carefully. And if he truly wanted Cody's safety, the nanny was down to help. She was ready to do whatever it took to keep the kid away from that life. But for that she needed something while remembering Mr. Parvalone had already done a lot to manipulate her. Their talk was cut off by Oscar's phone buzzing in his pocket, who answered right away looking hyped to get the call, and this time the contact was legit John Lee, who had gotten a message from Oscar. Then Mr. Parvalone started talking to that guy about a big proposal worth paying attention to. Vanessa knew their chat was over and decided to head to her room, even thinking she'd been dumb for believing in Oscar's sincerity when he clearly didn't need her protection. As she walked to the door, Mr. Parvalone called her back to say something, wanted to discuss something the next day, and suggested meeting at 10 a.m. Left alone in the room, Vanessa thought again it was already too late for her boss and that he'd chosen his path. Now she had to focus on the only person in this family who could still be saved. The next day, the nanny and Cody made a list, and the kid asked if she was writing it right. He also wanted to buy 2 watercolor kits, but Vanessa advised getting just one for now and the other later. Right then, Mr. Parvalone came in, and seeing the pretty long list, wanted to know what it was. Cody explained he'd made a list of art supplies since many had burned up. Oscar started reading it but didn't get why 2 aprons. His son said it was in case Clark showed up. Cody also knew the family's relations were tense, but was sure the Colts would soon realize his family wasn't a threat. Mr. Parvalone confirmed everything would go back to normal, and Nick was even a bit surprised by such formalities. Then Cody wanted to go buy the stuff, but the nanny suggested waiting until after lunch since his dad wanted to talk about something. Though Oscar thought the boss needed him for the meeting, he decided to stay with Nick's son. Right then, the kid said adults should discuss everything in front of him since he planned to stay. Vanessa saw this as a big chance to start slowly putting distance between dad and son. She kicked off the meeting asking about the camera's angle and tilt, then explained how to adjust the right angle and calculate it with a math formula. The kid found it super boring and quietly asked Nick to dip before the nanny started with the diagrams. And when Oscar was left only with Vanessa and Anna, they kept going. The boss noticed the nanny had cleverly figured out how to make Cody bail, thanking the girl he still asked what he wanted to talk about with her, Mr. Parvalone. Then Oscar admitted it wasn't about video surveillance but about other stuff. Anna immediately suspected it was about his operation. Mr. Parvalone revealed his plan aimed at messing with Mrs. Colt, even though he'd been clearly warned not to do it. Oscar hated being bossed around. Vanessa was a bit bummed since she thought it'd be about Cody's safety, but precisely because the Colt family's nanny had planted mics in his room, Oscar thought this did affect his son. That's what Mr. Parvalone was stirring up. And the consequences wouldn't take long to hit, so Anna asked what Oscar planned to do, not hiding his intention to get back at the lady. RecapManhwa, he didn't want to start an all-out confrontation. Then he revealed he'd gotten close to some John Lee nicknamed Rabbit. The boss offered him a deal way better than the French one, even more profitable thanks to his designer bags. Anna took it as Mr. Parvalone planning to somehow undercut the contract price between the French and the Chinese. But Oscar clarified he planned to offer authentic, ready-made Italian quality models. Vanessa immediately pictured how the French Mafia sold special pieces from factories while the triad redirected them to China to make fakes. The girl quickly calculated that selling to the boss would mean bigger losses to compete with the French. He agreed, but if they took too long, no profits would come since they could secure a connection with the triad in Chicago. Anna, listening closely to the boss, also agreed that would definitely piss off the French, but she feared this wouldn't work either, so Mr. Parvalone planned to hit their weak spot. That was his second attack route, which is why he called the meeting. The girl got what her boss meant and refused to hack the French Mafia for him, but Oscar just wanted to ask her something since she knew a lot about this stuff. Then he explained he was curious if the local mafia used crypto to launder money. However, crypto exchanges are under tighter regulations, which ups the chances of getting caught. Another option might be popular online games, where items are bought with money used in-game to boost points or scores. According to the game's own rules, then can be legally transferred to an account or sent to a digital wallet. Also legally, but Anna said Mrs. Colt preferred old-school methods. So she probably had some business. Mr. Parvalone objected since the lady didn't own enough businesses to launder money in those amounts. Then Vanessa thought it could be a casino, a place lots of people go, but Anna assured Mrs. Colt would oppose it, plus she thinks it's just for plebs. So the nanny suggested art galleries as an alternative. Right then, Anna shouted like she'd won an award, because she remembered Colt owns the House of Light, even surprising Mrs. Parvalone, who sees this as an old-school money laundering method. Vanessa proposed trying it, but instead of old paintings, use more modern tech like NFC auctions. This helped the boss a lot, who let her leave. Then the nanny decided to clean Cody's room. While walking, the girl kept wondering if she'd done right by helping provoke Mrs. Colt. The nanny now doubted if she was a good example for Cody by meddling in stuff with his dad. But the moment she decided to stay, she knew she'd be caught up in all this. Keeping Cody safe meant helping Oscar solve and anticipate threats. The doubt lingered, was Mrs. Colt really a threat to the kid? Lost in those thoughts, the girl didn't notice Anna coming up to say something. She told her she'd recovered personal data lost in the fire and realized she didn't know Vanessa's last name. Anna wanted to include it in the records, but the nanny didn't get why since no one on staff had ever asked before. Anna just smiled slyly, hinting that keeping her last name secret might raise suspicions about her. But Vanessa didn't see it as a secret, though she didn't know Nick's or Adam's last names either. The girl fell silent again in her thoughts, and Anna even got closer to find out the last name. Then the nanny said Smith, after which Anna thanked her and left. Vanessa realized Anna was up to something, but understood Anna wouldn't get anything from the last name she used to cover herself. That same night, Mr. Parvalone took his son and the nanny to the drawing room. The boy couldn't help bragging about how much he'd bought to always have the tools he needed on hand, but suddenly Cody stopped abruptly and fixed his gaze on the doors, scared like he'd seen a real ghost. The nanny, whom he accidentally pushed. He tried to figure out what had happened at that moment. Cody confessed that he had left his sketchbook in the room, and that same night it was absolutely necessary. Vanessa didn't get why there was so much fuss, but she got ready to go grab that thing, which even made Mr. Parvalone laugh and praised the nanny for her quick reflexes. But she didn't find it funny. Oscar noticed the girl was a bit offended and wanted to apologize somehow, but he was already heading the other way in the elevator. Vanessa scolded herself for looking so clumsy. Like a guilty student, when she got to Cody's room, she started digging through the huge pile of stuff, trying to find that sketchbook. But suddenly she heard a creak behind the door, like someone had entered the room. Right after her, the girl opened a thin crack in the door and tried to see what was going on. There, Nick and Anna were arguing about the successful hit on a money laundering spot that the enemies wouldn't be able to spend anymore, but Anna thought it was pretty risky and feared it could bring trouble to their boss. But Nick corrected her, saying it wasn't because of Mr. Parvalone but because of themselves, without understanding why his partner thought it was all good. Then he added that in his opinion, Oscar was just testing his luck, trying to get ahead. There, when Anna asked what he meant, Nick reminded her that there were still disagreements between the boss and the Don. And those disagreements started after an accident a few years ago. Anna immediately shivered and asked her partner not to bring it up, fearing the walls might have ears, but he insisted that Oscar had a pretty solid reason to act that way. At the same time, Nick hoped hard that Mr. Parvalone would come to his senses, at least for his son's sake. Still, Anna felt like something was missing. Oscar never does anything without a reason. Feeling the first chill of a nervous breakdown, Nick started pacing the room, thinking about the cause. Suddenly, he thought he saw something in the next room and decided to check it out to confirm. Vanessa, who was behind the door listening, realized the guy had caught her and hid instantly the next moment as the door swung open. The girl pretended to carefully rummage through her stuff and not pay attention to anything. Then she stood up abruptly and deliberately bumped her head against a protruding shelf on the wall. Afterwards, she faked being scared by Nick and showed big surprise seeing him there. He was curious what the nanny was doing there, and she explained she was looking for Cody's sketchbook among her other things. The girl quickly went back to stop the guy from ordering another huge steak and then not eating it, but Nick stopped her, which made her tense up. Although the guy only asked her to be more careful with Cody over the next few weeks, Vanessa didn't get why he was asking that, since she always did and took good care of the kid when Nick and Anna left. They realized the nanny had been there the whole time and could have heard everything. Anna remembered that Oscar trusted that girl. But Nick noticed his partner didn't. He didn't deny it and decided to find out anyway who she was, where she came from, and what she wanted from them. Shortly after, Vanessa was sitting with the kid at the table. He was drawing in the sketchbook while she worked on hers in her notepad. The girl then asked him what he would be if he could be whoever he wanted. Cody, who had been focused on drawing until then, didn't really get this question. The nanny gave him an example of an astronaut and showed him her drawing, which showed a person in a spacesuit. Cody assumed Vanessa had drawn it and thought the question was just dumb. The kid already knows what he'll be, but the nanny asked him to imagine not knowing and also not being a mafioso, but a regular kid from the province. Cody was interested to know what his dad would do, and the girl guessed he might produce chocolate. The kid thought for a moment, then said he'd be in charge of supplying cocoa beans to his dad. He imagined traveling the world looking for the best, taking control of farms so they produced just for them. And in the end, they'd limit deliveries so the chocolate would be more valuable on the market and they'd set the prices themselves. Then Cody admitted he knew why the babysitter was asking that, and he even called the girl out with a bit of sadness in his eyes. Cody insisted again that he didn't need a new mom, but Vanessa didn't get how that was related, since she just wanted to entertain the kid a bit. She also revealed that her mom always told her similar stuff, thinking she needed other interests and that she shouldn't get involved in the crime world. Once her mom even told her dad she needed more friends, not just from the snake den. Now that Cody doesn't have a mom, the babysitter wasn't about to get hit with that, but she doubted if he really understood what was going on, because earlier he hinted someone from Oscar's gang might be linked to his mom's disappearance, though Cody always stressed his loyalty to the family, and the babysitter thought that might show his fear. And deep down, the kid believed it all happened because of him. Vanessa assured the little guy he wasn't to blame for what happened and that he shouldn't beat himself up. Cody didn't think it was that simple and dove back into drawing, gripping his pencil tight, but Vanessa kept pushing that none of this should mess with his dreams. Even though Cody was already pissed, he repeated once more that one day his dad would be the boss and he'd be his right hand, promising peace for the whole family. The kid grabbed his sketchbook and told the babysitter not to get in his way, then went back to his room alone. Vanessa confirmed that Cody's mom also opposed him growing up like that, but then she disappeared, which might be the main reason. Oscar asked the babysitter to do all this. At that moment, Mr. Parvalone was in his room typing hard on his laptop when Anna walked in with a low mood and slammed 2 folders on his desk. Then asked the boss what he really knew about that woman working as a babysitter. He calmly replied that everything was in the folders, but she didn't see anything interesting that cleared things up. Anna brought up again that someone on their team might be involved in the fire and hinted it could be the babysitter, but Oscar was sure it wasn't her since he saw her shortly before the fire started spreading. However, Anna pointed out they had a big fight and then she left upstairs where the fire actually began, so that woman miraculously became the savior of his son and earned his full trust. Anna also thought Vanessa was a spy, a fake babysitter, since it was weird Oscar hired her so fast. Mr. Parvalone was already getting pissed and told Anna to stop, chill out, and sit down. Then started explaining it wasn't like that at all, and that he personally picked the babysitter for his son, plus he chose her way before sending the application to the prestigious Babysitter Academy. After finishing the course, the academy presents its top students and their diplomas, highlighting the best disciplines. To be 100% sure, Mr. Parvalone also checked her info through the database, but Anna kept doubting since nothing was known about Vanessa from when she was orphaned until she graduated from the academy. This girl was missing both a passport and a driver's license. Not even on social media, and no close relatives were found. But Oscar knew that perfectly well, which is exactly why he picked her. Then the boss explained Vanessa had no family left, and that if she disappeared, questions would start. Anna immediately got that Mr. Parvalone was implying Vanessa might die for some reason, but he corrected her, clarifying he meant the girl's disappearance, not her death. So Anna took it as a cold calculation since life in his family really wasn't easy. Oscar also added he chose a babysitter candidate who'd already faced life's harsh reality, but the main thing was that candidate understood what his son had to go through. Anna, however, advised the boss not to lose his naivety or trust, because she still believed Vanessa could prove her worth. The girl had no doubt about it. She was sure the babysitter working here was actually an outsider. Mr. Parvalone looked at her with cynicism. After all, he didn't expect anything else from her. Anna understood the convo could end here and hurried to walk away. Still feeling irritated, Nick was already waiting for her on the other side of the door, super interested in how the meeting had gone down. He couldn't resist teasing his co-worker, but she wasn't backing down and was ready to keep pushing forward. When they got in the elevator, Anna told Nick something was missing from Vanessa's story, but she didn't know what yet. Then Nick suggested she hit up the wizard Simon, but Anna didn't want anything to do with him, thinking he was kinda eccentric, Nick thought. Assured her that despite his weird clothes, he was the only one who could find out something about the nanny. Later the guy figured Anna just didn't want to drag headquarters into it in case she was wrong. She also feared that if she hired a cyber detective against Vanessa, it might turn out the nanny was innocent. Then Nick got curious again, asking if his co-worker was sure about her suspicions about that girl, but he was already dialing the number he needed. As soon as Anna put the phone to her ear, she immediately noticed they weren't alone in the hallway anymore. Right then, Vanessa came back with Cody, who angrily ran to his room. A little later, Mr. Parvalone and Adam headed out to start executing their twisted plan. Oscar told the driver to act like a tourist and Adam on the way. Decided to buy a Panama hat and sunglasses, fixing himself up and spinning in front of the boss, thinking that camo was perfect for a mission like this. Then Mr. Parvalone said in code that the chameleon was outside and told the driver to get ready. After that, a Chinese man, wearing glasses and a loose kimono, came out and greeted them cheerfully. At Trinity Sense, they were offering a special cleaning and healing program today, but then he realized the client had come for an online order. He took Oscar to a special room. The Chinese guy asked them to recall what they'd ordered, and Oscar said it was a locally made candle. The Chinese man was sure they had what the client needed, but warned it might be pricey. Mr. Parvalone said he could spend if necessary. Another girl came up to the counter asking if the candle was made of paraffin. The Chinese man assured her it was eco-friendly soy wax and vegan-friendly. The girl was worried because she'd read all candles have lead and she had a severe allergy. The Chinese guy offered her a diffuser. When the girl walked away, he realized they weren't there by accident, and he was ready to hand over the old lady but was still reporting from Boston. He explained all his candles go through his port, and he couldn't risk betraying such clients. Oscar understood that without a specific reason the Chinese wouldn't break the contract. Then, he hinted that soon there'd be shipping disruptions and grabbed one of the little bags from the counter, adding that if reasons to worry popped up, no one would blame them for stocking up. Oscar ripped open the bag and added that markets are connected now, and a small glitch can get real messy. Mr. Parvalone fully opened the bag and dumped its contents. Right in front of the Chinese guy, he immediately agreed they didn't want to get into trouble, but also wanted to see where the flame would move. Oscar suggested watching more closely, then turned around. But before leaving, he commented that probably their parsley had gone bad too. Although the Chinese man said it was valuable time, outside a driver was waiting for him and immediately asked how it went. RecapManhwa, he found out it went very well. Then they came back and Adam suggested celebrating the win with ice cream, while his boss recommended pistachio flavor. The driver got the order done without delay since he thought rides with the boss were the best. Meanwhile, Uncle Johnny called Oscar and the nephew reported that the Chinese had promised to consider the offer. Also, Mr. Parvalone was sure about his next move since Madame Cold had tricked him and needed to be punished. Johnny advised him not to make more enemies over this and not to confuse enemies with problems. At that moment upstairs, Cody was drawing again while the nanny decided to work on the computer reviewing surveillance footage. But for some reason she didn't feel comfortable. Still, the learned behavior patterns would help her spot anomalies in time. At that moment, Cody figured he'd have to draw in Vanessa's room the next day. The kid looked at the nanny with a wicked grin and suggested switching rooms, but she seemed to ignore him. His eyes were locked on the screen since he had seen Mrs. Kenneth in the footage. The sweet old lady pretended to be strolling near the garages, but it was obvious it wasn't a coincidence. Vanessa saw Mr. Parvalone return, and the lady immediately started calling someone, and there was Cody right in front of her, suggesting turning her room into an art studio while she'd crash on the couch. In response, the nanny suggested moving to a windowless room, since it would be safer. Then Cody asked what she was doing, something that seemed more important than him, and she explained she was just writing in her diary invisible to everyone. She pressed a button to switch the camera window to the blog, and started giving an example of how to fill out the diary. She began by saying Cody painted the sky with watercolors, but he corrected her saying they were acrylics. Although she didn't believe him because she suspected a trick since the colors looked dull and the guy was also embarrassed about painting. Also with watercolors. That pissed Cody off even more, who found the nanny unbearable with those made-up stories. Then he went to his room while Vanessa got back to work on her laptop. After digging a bit, she discovered Mrs. Kenneth's phone was active. Then she matched the schedule when Oscar left and arrived and concluded that in recent days at the same time, Mrs. Kenneth was calling someone. She was aware the old lady wasn't calling by accident and started suspecting her, but she also wanted to know who Mrs. Kenneth had called. At that moment, Oscar was entering the lobby. Vanessa immediately asked him to pay attention, because she had something important to tell him. It was hard for her to say it, but she announced that one of the employees was informing her through a number from Albuquerque. Mr. Parvalone immediately guessed the girl was talking about Mrs. Kenneth. Vanessa was surprised he knew, but Oscar explained she was reporting to her uncle. The young woman wanted to ask more. but Mr. Parvalone understood she was interested in why they hadn't taken away that woman's powers. He felt more comfortable having his trusted man close to Oscar. Besides, Kenneth is a good waitress and makes excellent coffee. The boss assured her she didn't need to worry so much, but also thanked her a lot for bringing it up to him. Then, Mr. Parvalone was about to leave, but before crossing the door, he stopped and spoke to the nanny again. He immediately confessed he needed an escort, but Vanessa didn't exactly get what he meant. He told her about the auction at the House of Light, that Anna usually accompanies him to, but she was out of town now, so he asked her to go with him. Also, some extra eyes and the little help wouldn't hurt. He also mentioned that Nick and Adam would be watching Cody since they hadn't thrown a farewell party in a while. Then Mr. Parvalone got super close to the girl and confessed he needed her, which knocked the legs out from under Vanessa. Without thinking twice, she agreed, and Oscar asked her to be ready by 8. When leaving, he promised he'd personally handle the dress, leaving the girl blushing standing in the middle of the lobby. Soon, Vanessa was already getting ready for the Mafia organized auction, something she couldn't consider normal. She also understood very well that a crowd would gather there. Everyone painted their own weird picture, but the nanny saw it as a good chance to get info on who controlled Chicago from the shadows. Protecting Cody was one thing, but seeing a threat in every close person was a whole different story. That's why Vanessa decided to go fully prepped, not just with a gorgeous dress, but also bold makeup. They had prepared a pretty expensive necklace for her, but she thought it was an unnecessarily big accessory. Instead, she wore her emerald pendant, which really suited her face shape. She returned the necklace since she didn't plan on wearing it anyway. Approaching Oscar's room, she called him, but he didn't answer, so she decided to go in. Not finding the boss there either, Vanessa thought he must be in the shower and chose to leave the box with the jewel. While checking the room, she started looking for a better place to leave the item. Then the nanny noticed a metal chest in the closet on the wall that clearly didn't belong to the hotel. Inspecting it visually, the girl determined it was new, and maybe she was hiding something that Oscar was keeping from her. Vanessa also remembered that small suitcase that Anna took out after the mansion fire. After inspecting it, the girl decided to try cracking the code, but for now she couldn't figure it out. Then she heard the boss's voice right behind her, and immediately started making up an excuse. Oscar noticed what Nanny was doing in her room, and she was ready to confess right away. Vanessa explained she didn't need the necklace, that's why she wanted to stash it in the safe drawer. The boss took the little box from her, noticing she looked great, but she just wanted to make a good impression. Mr. Parvalone didn't doubt it at all. No wonder he had asked her to come along. Then he placed it on the shelf, saying it wasn't valuable enough to put in the safe drawer. After that, the girl apologized for interrupting and decided to give the boss time to change. Left alone, Mr. Parvalone wondered for a moment if Tsunami had tried to open that safe drawer. Meanwhile, Vanessa decided to check out Cody's room to see how he was doing and immediately noticed the mess from the bachelor meeting. The three were sitting on the couch, playing a video game intensely just like Nanny had imagined. Shortly after, Oscar appeared in the same room and told his little guy to listen to Adam and Nico. Just as they were about to leave, Cody suddenly stopped them. They paused, ready to listen closely to what the kid had to say, but he just gave them a pretty serious look and told them not to stay out late. The nanny was really happy Cody wasn't hiding his feelings and promised she'd bring his dad back safe and sound. On the way, Oscar gave Vanessa a quick briefing, telling her to try to obey him, since his goal was just to slightly annoy Mrs. Colt. Also, no matter what happened, he advised her to stay close and not make decisions on her own. The girl agreed and then added that she was the one protecting him, so everything would be fine. Meanwhile, Anna arrived at the Albuquerque complex. Because she had urgent business to handle there, she met Simon, who needed to find as much info as possible about the nanny Vanessa, but the guy couldn't offer anything useful since her digital life was basically non-existent. He found nothing, even though he usually managed to track clues if someone tried to erase their trail. Also, the facial recognition program didn't detect any matches like she'd changed her identity. Also, the article about how her accountant parents died in a fire was written by a journalist who never existed. Anna suspected the nanny's parents hadn't died at all and found out someone had erased all her past data. Simon thought she might have done it herself if she was the one trying to hack their servers. Then he told Anna the boss suspected something weird about Oscar's plans, so he tasked him with investigating everything. Also, Simon was surprised Anna didn't know anything about the hack, but she wasn't interested in anything other than Vanessa. Meanwhile, at the House of Light, guests were already arriving and everything was set for the event. Oscar asked if Vanessa liked the place, and she noticed the building itself was very charming. The paintings seemed super symmetrical to her, while Oscar thought they reminded him of math. Then she found out one of those paintings cost 3 million euros and no sane person would buy them, so she also realized everyone there were hardcore criminals pretending to know about art. She watched a couple of people approach a painting and admired it in a dumb, forced way. Some looked so ridiculous that Vanessa started doubting they were all experienced criminals. She saw it as a parody of the elitist society where all the big deals usually go down. Soon she noticed among the attendees, at the Mafia organization led by Grandma Ivanova, a bit further on, she saw the triad had also arrived for the event. Mrs. Colt didn't miss the chance to show off her fanciest outfit. While Oscar and the babysitter watched the guests behind them, suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. Turning around, they immediately saw Kyle, who thought that meeting was pretty unexpected. However, Mr. Parvalone knew his nephew and didn't believe the coincidence was really unexpected. Then he got curious why he was there. Kyle didn't hide why he came since he was there for the same reason as Oscar, but RecapManhwa, he doubted that and figured Uncle Johnny had sent him to spy, but Kyle wasn't here for, and he straight up told Oscar his plans weren't as secret as he thought they were.